Welcome everyone to the House Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. It is Tuesday, February 11th, 2025, 2 p.m. here in Conference Room 325. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Through your testimony, you help us do a better job as legislators. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And for those who are watching us online and providing testimony online, thanks to you as well. For those who are providing testimony, I'd like to ask if you could keep your testimony to 2 minutes. I'll ask you to summarize at that point. If you're testifying via Zoom, please mute yourself and keep your video off until you're testifying and then turn it off again after you're finished. Use the Zoom chat function to communicate with our technical staff only to work out any issues you have. Don't try to send me any messages because I won't get them. So I'm not being rude, I just don't get them. If you're disconnected, don't panic, try to reconnect and I'll try to fit you in as soon as you come back in. If the power goes off here in the building and we have to reschedule, we'll post appropriate notice so everyone will know when we're meeting for further consideration. If you're testifying on Zoom, please do not use any trademarked or copyrighted images. It kicks us off of YouTube, and that's a problem. Please, as well, conduct yourself with aloha, and please refrain from profanity or any uncivil behavior. As I say always, it's okay to disagree, but let's not be disagreeable. We can actually do good work together with that, our different ideas and opinions. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. First up, we have House Bill 606. Relating to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. This measure extends the Act 279 Special Fund to June 30th, 2028, deposits the funds into and appropriates funds out of the Act 279 Special Fund to eliminate its wait list, and requires the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to submit a strategic plan detailing the anticipated uses of the funds appropriated, and we want an annual report. First up, we have the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Good to see you, Mr. Watson.
Cully Watson for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Good afternoon, Chairman Tarnas and Vice Chair Poi Poi, as well as members of the committee. We are very strongly in support of this particular bill. We've basically just about used up the $600 million. We need $6 billion because we have over 29,000 on our wait list. So obviously the second 600 million, we've kind of laid it out as going to the second phase of the 28 projects we have. So we ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your good work with your team. You're making great progress. Appreciate it. Next person who said they wanted to testify is Philip Shane Pale Kupa'a Lahui Alliance.
Aloha.
Aloha.
I did some testimony. I'm not going to read it. I just want to make one important point. Aloha, Mahina, and Chair Tarnas. I just wanted to say that this bill is really important, I think, to the Native Hawaiian community. I've been involved in activism for Hawaiians on the street and all over. I think that one of the biggest issues that we've been looking at least for the last 20 years, as far as I can remember, has been the diaspora. Hawaiians leaving Hawaii at such an alarming rate. I think the Hawaiians are leaving Hawaii more than any other ethnic group from Hawaii. I think that is just so problematic, and this is one way to actually really address this particular issue. So many Hawaiians that we know personally in my family had just really forced to leave, right? They can't afford to live in Hawaii. So I just wanted to really impress on that particular issue, which is the diaspora. Again, you feel very helpless when you think about these issues, especially that one. I think this bill really provides a lot of hope for us who are in the community, have been active for many years, and I think this really would address the overall issue of Hawaiians actually leaving Hawaii, which I think is not a good thing, and I think it's something for you guys to consider, but mahalo nui for your time.
Mahalo, Mr. Pali. I appreciate your advocacy. Next person that said they wish to testify is Kimmer Horson. Not present on Zoom? Not present on Zoom either. In support. That's all that said they would. That's all that said they wish to testify. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on House Bill 606? Online, anybody? Nope. Okay. If not, questions, members? Not a question, just something that let people know this This measure is an important one. There are other measures that we'll be hearing as well that will keep this idea moving forward to try to figure out how we're going to come up with another $600 million. It was great to be able to do it once when we had a lot of cash available. That's not the current situation. This is a priority for this committee, so we're going to try to keep working on it. So stay tuned. Okay, let's move on to the second bill, House Bill 1086, relating to housing. This measure exempts any development of homestead lots or housing for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands from general excise and use taxes. First up, we have the Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
We'll stand on our testimony.
Oh, come on. Director Watson, we need you to stand so that everyone on TV can see you and tell us why this is such a good idea.
Okay, well, obviously, if we can get the waiver of the GET, it'll have a really good impact on the net cost of the housing on the back end. So we obviously, whatever little bit we can take off of the actual eventual cost of the house would really be helpful, especially when you look at the people we're trying to service, which are those that are fairly low income. So definitely this helps. Thank you.
And your testimony that everyone I encourage to look at, it also reminds us about the governor's emergency proclamation. You want to tell us a little about that?
Yeah, we were able to take advantage of the governor's emergency proclamation, which gave us, a waiver on not only the GET but the school impact fees. And we've kind of laid out, how it is actually from a dollar amount perspective, especially with the the GET as well as the school impact fees. And I'll just add on the school impact fees, I think it's actually appropriate we don't get charged because.
We'll deal with that bill later.
Okay.
Let's just talk about GE tax. So I just wanted to make sure that members and the public know that your testimony has a lot of good information, and I wanted to make sure they understood about the emergency proclamation already exempting you.
It's already done.
From GE tax, and then you have provided us with an estimate of the GET savings if this is granted going forward. Appreciate it. Thank you for your summary of your testimony. Next, we have the Department of Taxation. Those who haven't been in my committee hearing before, I always ask people to come up to the podium so everyone on TV can see you.
Okay.
And that you provide us the highlights of your testimony, not just stand on your testimony.
Oh, okay, sorry. My name is Eliza. I'm here from the Department of Taxation, and the Department of Taxation can administer this bill. We currently, because of the emergency proclamation, we currently do administer it. So we'll just make it formal. Thank you.
And if I may, for those who haven't yet read your testimony and should, you specifically asked for a proposed effective date of January 1st, 2026.
Yes, thank you.
Just want to make sure everyone understood that.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. And next we have Tom Yamachika, Tax Foundation of Hawaii on Zoom. Please proceed, Mr. Yamachika.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Tom Yamachika.
Tom, could you speak up, please?
This better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Tom Yamachika, Tax Foundation of Hawaii. I've submitted comments, mostly technical, but wanted the committee to consider that Department of Hawaiian Homelands beneficiaries are already getting a bunch of benefits, and you can kind of weigh those in deciding how much additional benefits to grant. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That's all that we've been told that would like to testify. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1086? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Next bill, House Bill 1307, relating to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. This measure appropriates funds to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands for water well development, for geophysical investigation, exploration, and identification of geothermal resources on Hawaiian homelands. On this measure, first up, Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Holly Watson again for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Good afternoon. This particular bill is kind of a follow-up on the original funding that was provided where we did an initial study. We used the $500,000. This, we're asking for about $20 million to do some slim holes, as well as examine other sites, as well as examine the water well development, as well as maybe picking up some consultants to assist us in the process. Obviously, this is very important. We do have several viable sources of geothermal development on the Big Island. So if we can kind of focus it down to one site, we move forward on that. So this will help.
Okay, thanks very much. Next, we have Chamber of Sustainable Commerce testifying on Zoom. Anasazian? Nope, not present. In opposition. Next, Navahine Kaho'opi'i on Zoom. Not present, in opposition. Next, Richard Ha.
I'm present.
Oh.
I'm present. Navahini Kaho'opi'i.
Yes, Ms. Ms. Kaho'opi'i, please proceed.
Yes. Navahini Kaho'opi'i, I'm a Kapuna residing on Hawaiian homelands, and I oppose HB 1307. So far, there have been no Hawaiian homelands beneficiary consultations, which is a condition of the Department of the Interior. There's also a conflict of interest with Mr. Michael Kalikini, who is the Hawaiian Homes East Hawaii Commissioner and is also the director of Puna Geothermal. This project, for me, reeks of environmental racism. So far in Hawaiian homelands, we have airports, wastewater treatment plants, landfills, ports and petroleum storage tanks, asphalt plants, spills, leaks, illnesses, asthma, cancer clusters, cell towers, wind farms, solar farms, military bases that test illegal substances like white phosphorus and depleted uranium that leave our lands uninhabitable. And now we have another toxic, poisonous project that's to be located in a residential area of Hawaiian homelands, namely one of the sites is in Kauai High, Kailapa. Puna residents have already been crying out for decades for help when subjected to blowouts of hydrogen sulfide, killing animals and surrounding vegetation, and at sometimes forcing the residents to evacuate when a 2,200-pound hydrogen sulfate poisoned their community. This sulfate is highly toxic, causing headaches, loss of breath, nausea, vomiting, and in extreme cases, death. It's also extremely flammable. There are 600 residents in Kailapa Hawaiian homelands, and you are proposing to put this project in the middle of their community, threatening their safety, health, and well-being. My suggestion is not to waste 20 million taxpayer dollars when this project is not wanted by the beneficiaries, by Kailapa residents who don't want it, and also the surrounding community. Some of them are multi-million-dollar gated communities who also are opposed to this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Richard Ha on Zoom. Not present, in opposition. Next, person named Kim on Zoom. Please proceed, Kim.
Chair, Vice Chair, my name's Kim Koch and I oppose this. Many of you know me by my other projects, which require me to learn process, community consultation, and procedural guidelines. These projects also caused my family to move to Kau. Kau is almost off-grid in a sense. Many do not have water or power, no public internet or Wi-Fi, and it is still a very subsistence way of life. Thus, proper procedural outreach needs extra attention. I can tell you this proposal has not been discussed with the community, much less the beneficiaries. In fact, what has been discussed is DHHL threatening to gate off the only ocean access for 20 miles each way. These meetings are routinely canceled, rescheduled randomly, and occasionally you'll get a post on social media. This is not proper outreach, notification, or consultation, especially for a rural community, most without internet. DHHL completed a sketchy EA on the South Point complex in 2018 with no mention of geothermal explanation. In fact, they claimed that a Fonzie, by speaking to 15 people, no cultural impact assessment or anything was completed. It was a total sham. I would oppose giving any money, much less $20 million for this project until they complete a full EIS and encourage them to stop threatening the beneficiaries and local communities with cutting off all access via gates. If you must pass something, have them complete an EIS before funding any projects. We didn't want the windmills, we don't want geothermal, and we really don't want gates blocking off our only access to the sea. What we do want is transparency and proper community discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Isaiah Kanoel Smith on Zoom. Please proceed.
Hi, I reside in Ka'u as well, and I'm providing this statement in connection with the proposed construction of a geothermal plant at South Point. I have significant concerns regarding the environmental, social, and economic impact this project will have on the area and its residents. The beach and surrounding ecosystems are home to diverse marine life, which may be threatened by industrial activity, potential pollution, and habitat disruption. The local community, which relies on the beach for fishing or recreational use, could suffer economic consequences if the area becomes less accessible or attractive due to industrial development. Alternative sites farther from sensitive coastal environments should be explored to minimize ecological and community disruption. I have personally observed the natural state of the beach and surrounding areas, which would be permanently altered by the plant's construction. Residents, including myself, have raised concerns reflecting the widespread opposition to the project, and I wouldn't suggest giving any money to any development.
Where the water coming from?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from Nana Honua Manuel on Zoom. Not present, in opposition. Next, Hazel Kuahivinui on Zoom. Not present, in opposition. Next, Fernanda Kuahivinui on Zoom. Please proceed. Could you unmute yourself, please? Fernanda Kuahivinui. Okay, we're going to go on, but if you come back on, IT will tell me, and I'll come back to you. Okay, next, Kimmer Horsen, in person or on Zoom? No, Horsen. Kimmer Horsen, in opposition. Not present. And Terry Napeahe on Zoom. Please proceed.
Aloha,
Aloha.
this is Terry Napi. Terry Napi from Hawaii Island. I'm representing, I've disclosed that I'm off right now from work. I work for the planning department. I also wanted to represent two organizations, and that would be Pele Defense Fund. I'm a member of the Pele Defense Fund organization with President Polikapu. I wanted to just kind of give you a real quick insight of the money that is being appropriated for 20 million for the exploration history of geothermal. It began in the early 80s with Don Thomas preparing a subthermal map of testing that would be a popular place to have geothermal explorations and a plant. So the best, I think, thermal area for a hotspot would be in Puna on the Rift. And their initiative in the 80s was to put 20 plants producing 25 megawatts for 500 megawatts in a cable pushed over to the sea to Oahu. That was pushed by the state. It was an initiative for the state who wanted to be the first state department that would be owning a utilities company. At that time, there were three geo plants that was being pushed, all at the same time. Campbell Estates, Pele Defense Fund filed a lawsuit against Campbell Estates, and thus, have what we call a lawsuit that set precedents. Pele Defense Fund versus Patty. I would take deep research on this particular lawsuit because this is, it set precedents for gathering rights of our people, also religious practices and rights. This initiative ended because of the opposition on Hawaii Island, and just wanted to let Hawaiian Homes know that it is still here. The best place for this geothermal projects would be on Hawaii Island, on Rift. Well, there's one plant left. PGV, who Michael Caligny works for, and our district representative for Hilo, which I think is a conflict of interest. However, I just wanted to really quick let everyone know that there were 142 residents in Puna that got arrested for the ill treatment that they had with the geothermal plants that were being put in Puna. For those of you who live off of
Ms.
our
Napeahi,
island,
could you
the
summarize,
only
please?
Geothermal initiative that ever happened. Sure, the only geothermal initiatives that has ever happened was on Moku o Keawe, and it is not going to happen. So that money, you're gonna lose it.
Hey, mahalo. I appreciate your testimony.
No.
Next testifier, Grace Bazila on Zoom. Please proceed.
Aloha, I'm Grace Bazilla from Kilkaha, Hilo, Hawaii, Moku Keawe. I oppose this bill. 20 million for this is a waste of money. And it's not geophysical investigation. Geothermal is not the reason that we have land set aside for Hawaiian beneficiaries. There are so many other things that we could use the land for. In my lifetime, the lifetime of my grandparents, my parents, there's been so much use and misuse of Hawaiian homelands on behalf of the state, the county, private organizations, and this is just another one, and it's not what Hawaiian homelands is made for. There are, what was it, over 29,000 people without homes, and that's what Hawaiian homeland should be used for, not for drilling anything. Especially, I find it crazy that people on Oahu Island are making decisions on something that's not just our land, but I don't know if you guys have seen how active our volcano has been, how active Kilauea has been. And not only is this a waste of 20 million, but 20 million is not even a drop in a bucket of what the state would need to pay out if they try to do these things. These efforts would be made, and I can only envision the need for emergency assistance for Hawaii Island that would supersede 20 million because of what they're trying to do. And, a lot of interesting weather type, land type, elemental things happen on Hawaii Island. And you guys can spend the money, but there's so many other things you could spend 20 million on. And this is for something that we in Hawaii Island are not for, we will never be for. Please find another use for that 20 million. And please, DHHL, stop trying to do geothermal on our land. This is not okay. Mahalo.
Mahalo. And then the last person that said they wanted to testify on this measure is Cindy Freitas on Zoom. Please proceed.
He mele komo, a he mele aloha, nana kupuna i ka au I hala. Aloha mai kako.
Aloha.
I'm Cindy Freitas, and I'm a Native Hawaiian descendant of the native inhabitants prior to 1778. I'm also a cultural practitioner who was instilled with the practice from my grandparents from Mauka to Makai. The appropriation of the 20 million for geothermal exploration on Hawaiian homelands, aole hiki. No. I'm in opposition of that because there's no transparency with the department, with the beneficiary, especially me. I did not see consultations. It will put an uproar against the legal compliances with Hawaiian Home Act and the state and federal regulation. Fair distribution. We always get shortchanged with the beneficiary. It only goes for low income people, but the rest has to buy it for market price on our home lands. Aole hiki. Environmental concerns. A geothermal exploration on Hawaiian homelands. Groundwater depletion, contamination, thermal and chemical pollution. Effects on nearby ecosystem, especially our endemic Hawaiian species. Not only are you trying to kill us, you're going to kill the animals as well. Systematic activities and land sustainability. It causes earthquake. We have enough earthquake with the volcano naturally. Why would you do man-made earthquakes? This is the land of Pele. You don't want to mess with Pele. Land subsidy and sinkholes. That's what it causes. When they do exploration around the island, they cause sinkholes. That land is no good. Air quality concern, hydroxy sulfide, H2S emission is a strong rotten egg odor, highly concentrated with HS2. It's toxic. It has respiratory issues, headaches, nausea, carbon dioxide, CO2, and methane, CH4 emissions. That's another killing us. Impact on native Hawaiian ecosystem and cultural site. Disturbance of endemic wild plants and wildlife. You're gonna put a strain on them as well as our plants. Potential desecration of sacred lands. This is our ancestors you're gonna dig up, especially Madam Pele. Waste
Mahalo. Could you wrap up, please, Ms. Freitas?
Okay, I will. Radioactive elements and heavy metal that's going in this. And on my testimony, I had put resources where you can find all this legal stuffs on there. Thank you. Have a good day. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure, HB 1307? If not, questions, members? You have a question, Representative? Go ahead.
No.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Director Watson, please. Could you comment on the possible water and geothermal resource goals?
You know what, I have a staff person that's kind of focusing on that and was
Thank you.
assigned that task. So I'll let him speak. It's Russell Kaupu.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, sorry, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Russell Kaupu, I'm a member on the staff, Department of Hawaiian Homelands. I work in Chair Watson's office. A little bit of background, I was commissioner on the Hawaiian Homes Commission at a time when the commission, as a commission initiative, wanted to look into investigating geothermal resources on Hawaiian homelands. I was the chair of a permitted interaction group that was put together for that purpose. I have since resigned from the commission to accept the position at the department, but I continue to serve on this permitted interaction group as a staff member to the group. This group has been primarily responsible for the investigation that the department is doing into geothermal resources on Hawaiian homelands, and the interplay between water and geothermal resource, as it's been explained to our committee, our permitted interaction group, you need three things to develop geothermal. You need heat, you need water, and you need permeability of the surface. So you need the heat to heat up the water, and then you need the water to be able to flow upwards to eventually tap in and to draw that heat up into some process to generate electricity. Beyond that, the science of geophysics and all of that is beyond my capacity, but we have researched and we have consultants that we've worked with to identify these different issues. I can speak as to the comments from people about beneficiary consultation if Chair would like to hear the department's response to that.
Let's let Representative Shimizu continue his questioning,
Okay.
and then others will have the opportunity to ask
Yeah,
that question.
the specific question was like the end goal of this initial exploratory effort. You know, you want to do this to get someplace, yeah? So where are we trying to get to?
So our permitted interaction group has made recommendations to the full commission, and our recommendation is that we continue to pursue the steps to determine the viability of geothermal development at sites on Hawaiian homelands. the process, you start with a physical inspection. This is the geophysical side of the equation. And then you also are doing things like what's called magnetotelluric
I
testing.
understand. I just want to get to the end. Can you just, I don't mean to cut you off, but we have time limits. So can
Yeah.
you just answer the question as far as where we're headed to? What is the end goal?
To produce information that we can go to private industry and enter into some sort of arrangement for private industry to develop geothermal electricity development on Hawaiian homelands.
Oh, okay, so it'll be contracting a third party to develop this, I'm assuming that end goal that would produce power from this
Yes.
geothermal resource.
Correct.
And will you need a EIS also?
Yes, we will.
So the additional monies beyond this exploratory would be a third-party contract, and where would this money come from?
So what's been proposed is that the department enter into a public-private partnership, that we provide the resource and the land, that industry provides the know-how and the finances, and then they would pick up the tab for the, the big examination that was needed.
Thank you, I got it. Great, appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Vice Chair?
Hi, Russell.
Aloha.
So I'm glad you're here because I just, coming off of Rep. Shimizu's question, how much water does it require
For,
I mean, I know that this is just for wells, but if, everything were to go as according to plan, and then you do enter into a partnership and it is developed into like an energy source, is there like a ballpark of how much water it requires to operate?
I don't know that offhand. I know that water is required to circulate heat to the surface, and then it gets recharged back into the ground. But I don't know the flow rates and that kind of thing. That Michael Kalekini, whose name has come up, he does work for a power producer. He would know that, but I can get that for you.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be good. Thank you.
Other questions, members? I have questions, if I may ask. So could you explain to the committee and to the public at what point the Chapter 343 come into play in terms of the environmental analysis, the cultural impact analysis? Is it required to do the initial work, like the slim hole drilling and the various testing? Do you have to do some Chapter 343 analysis for that to occur, or is it only later? Could you explain that,
So my
please?
understanding, and having consulted with our AGs, it is a later process. It's when we have gone through the initial validation and we're looking to change or to use raw land to develop a different use of that raw land, then we need to go through the 343 process.
And I would urge you to look at the experience that I think on the slopes of Hualalai, there was a proposal to do some just non-invasive analysis, and they were taken to court and they were told you had to do a 343 analysis, probably an EA.
Okay.
So 343 might be triggered earlier than you think.
Okay.
Could you please describe to me the beneficiary consultation that you've already done and plan to do on this initiative?
Thank you for the opportunity. We have started the process. It is early in the process. Our policy and our requirements for beneficiary consultation, when there is a definitive action or decision to be made by the commission, then we take it to the beneficiaries and we take it to the beneficiary communities that are most directly affected by our decision. It gives the beneficiaries an opportunity to learn, to observe, and then to reflect back to their island commissioner or to the commission in whole prior to making that decision. The process of going through validation of the resource, what we're talking about today, the funding, that's kind of the upfront work that the department has to do to get in a position to present something to the Hawaiian Homes Commission. But knowing that this subject is such a big concern for a lot of community members, including our beneficiaries, we've started the process of getting the word out. This past year, 2024, we participated in 4 community listening sessions. These were conducted under the auspices of an organization called NREL. It's National Research Energy Laboratory. They were doing some federally funded research, and they asked if we would be interested in serving on their community advisory board. I did serve on that board, and in the process, we offered and we did host 2 of these 4 community listening sessions. Our commissioners, 2 of whom on the Hawaii Island serve on my permitted interaction group, participated in these community listening sessions along with myself. The process that we followed was to get word out, again, to those most directly affected communities. So notice was posted on the Hawaiian Homes website. It was physically posted at the district offices on Hawaii Island. And we went the added step to try and notify beneficiary and groups that we knew would specifically be opposed to any kind of geothermal development. We heard the name Palikapu Deadman. He was a participant in our Waimea, Hawaii listening session and had very good points to share about his religious belief and his opposition to any kind of geothermal. But then we also had, a lot of people like today's testimony that were in favor of the renewable resource that we can tap. So we have heard those voices. We are continuing those efforts. Just earlier this morning, I was meeting with our planning office at the department. We're looking to do more concentrated sessions in the specific communities that we have announced that we'd like to expand into. To date, we've only been up on Mauna Kea on the east flank and down in the Humu'ula area, kind of in the saddle between the 2 volcanoes. We'd like to use the money that we're seeking here to expand our look into Kauai High and Ka'u. We haven't done anything in those communities yet, but people have seen those in our reports, and I think that's why there's concern coming from those communities. But we need an opportunity to go out and specifically address those communities on this basic, what is geothermal? What does it take to tap the geothermal resource? What are the safety concerns that you hear about? What are their, are they valid? Is the science, has it come to a point where we can control those kind of effects?
It sounds like the beneficiaries in the Kauai, the Kailapa area and Ka'u area feel like they haven't had any consultation yet, so this is premature for you to be seeking funding to go do work in their area. And so that is a concern to members of the committee. That these beneficiaries feel surprised. And it sounds like the beneficiary consultation that you've already done, do you feel like you've been able to reach into those communities?
I couldn't tell you by participant name and so forth who showed up. But I do know that the West Hawaii listening sessions were held in Kona and 2 separate ones in Waimea. That was mainly because that's where our facilities are, and we were hosting the session. Until relatively recently, we weren't considering moving beyond Mauna Kea and Humu'ula into Kauai High and Ka'u. We'd like to do that now. That's the direction that the permitted interaction group is heading. But we need to now go through the process of that directed community beneficiary communication with those communities.
Okay. And then final point, you're asking for $20 million. That's a big ask.
Yes.
And I think it would be useful for the Finance Committee if our committee decides to move this bill on, it would go to Finance Committee. They'll be looking at those numbers very diligently, and I think it would behoove Department of Hawaiian Homelands to be considering what would be a smaller ask that you could do in the time that you have over the next year or 2, and so that what's achievable and that would be coming in at a lower price point.
Okay.
Something to consider with Finance Committee consideration if this bill moves forward.
Thank you.
Other questions, members? If not, second time around, Mr. Shimizu?
I just wanted to thank the testifier for your expert sharing, and apologize if I was abrupt with you. I'm just trying to get to the point. So
Yeah,
thank you.
no need to apologize. I understand.
Vice Chair?
Thanks. Just to follow up on the beneficiary consultation, it sounds like you've done community outreach through a partnership with NREL and those meetings, but those weren't technically like official beneficiary consultation meetings.
They weren't official in the sense that we didn't start the process, but they were in the same light or in the same manner of the kind of consultation we would have conducted. We worked off of our beneficiary list to get the notices out. We posted it in the appropriate places per our administrative rules for beneficiary consultation.
Were they labeled as beneficiary consultations so that people were aware that they were in a consultation, or was it more of like an informational listening session?
It was more informational listening session, and it was primarily under the NREL header, so people could have got misunderstood that. But we made a point to try and contact specific individuals that we knew would be interested in this, and they were fully aware of the department's participation, and that our ultimate goal was to advance the beneficiary knowledge on the issue so that we could move to the next stage in the process. Yeah.
Thank you. I think something that my family has found really useful in beneficiary consultations is getting the postcards in the mail.
Right.
That tells you you're being consulted.
Right.
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much to
Thank
the
you.
testifiers. Let's move on to the next measure. House Bill 1408, relating to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. This measure allows the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to utilize the dwelling unit revolving fund as collateral when the department acts as an eligible borrower for a loan agreement under Section 184A of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1992, as amended. First up, we have the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members, Dean Minakami, Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation. We stand on our testimony in support. This bill will basically allow DHHL to receive more favorable financing terms when getting loans.
Thank you. Next, Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Good afternoon, Kali Watson of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. This particular bill kind of addresses the need or financing that's going to be required for the vertical construction, the housing. The 184A are portfolio loans that come from the private banks. They are a source that typically is difficult to get. Most banks, they look at the department and they're hesitant to make loan awards. So by collateralizing the DERF fund, that will provide a certain amount of protection. And I guess we really do need this funding because with all the different units or infrastructure and projects we're putting in, the vertical construction finance is going to be an issue. So this will help address that. Thank you.
Thank you. And just so everyone's aware, is this to appropriate $75 million in FY26 and $75 million in FY27 to the dwelling unit revolving fund to be able to be used as collateral? Is that accurate?
I believe it was 70 and 70. Maybe I got it wrong, but something like that.
But is
around that number.
appropriation of these funds into the dwelling unit revolving fund as collateral?
As collateral.
So the funds would stay in the fund?
Right, that's correct.
Okay, that's what's being proposed. All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify on HB 1408? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, thanks very much to the testifiers. Let's move on to the next measure. House Bill 1088, relating to school impact fees. This measure exempts housing developed by the Department of Hawaiian Homelands from school impact fees. First up, we have the Department of Education.
Aloha Chair, Tarnas, Vice Chair Popoi, and members of the committee. I'm Jideen Urasaki, Public Works Administrator with the Office of Facilities and Operations, testifying on behalf of the Department of Education. The The department stands on its written testimony, which provides comments on this measure. The Hawaii School Impact Fee Law plays a vital role in the development of new school facilities in designated areas where the construction of new housing directly increases the student enrollment. Other than direct appropriations from the legislature, school impact fees are the only other source of funding to support the development of new school facilities. The Hawaii Revised Statutes 302A 1603A3 specifies that anyone who develops new residences in school impact fee districts must pay impact fees and in some cases dedicate lands, including all government housing projects. The practice of requiring developers of new residential units to dedicate land to mitigate impacts on student enrollment caused by new residential developments is consistent with state and county land use requirements for purposes of essential public facilities such as parks, fire, and police stations. Although the department recognizes the importance and need of affordable workforce and housing for the use by Department of Hawaiian Homelands and their beneficiaries, the exemption proposed by this bill would limit funding resources and the dedication of land intended to address the impacts on school facilities generated by new residential developments. The department would like to continue to engage with other departments and agencies to ensure that the department is part of the solution in addressing the needs for essential public facilities for their intended communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Thank you, Carly Watson for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We're in favor of this. Again, the back end will help reduce the cost of the houses to our beneficiaries. I'd also note in our testimony, we do identify the significant number of land parcels we've made available to the Department of Education to construct schools on our lands at no cost or very nominal rent. So it's not like we're ignoring the need for these types of facilities. We actually help facilitate it. But it would be very helpful if we could reduce those charges, thereby reducing the cost of housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person said they wanted to testify was Tom Yamachika, Tax Foundation of Hawaii, on Zoom. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, Tom Yamachika from Tax Foundation of Hawaii. To summarize what we have written in our testimony, our research into what school impact fees do is basically that if you develop new houses and the houses are likely to have children in them, then obviously you'll need schools to educate those children. The existing set of exemptions for school impact fees basically is designed to pick up developments or buildings which are not likely to produce children like commercial areas. And those we can understand. The exemptions proposed in this bill would seem contrary to that, because there would be developments with people in them, and the people would presumably have kids. So the need would be there, but the satisfaction of that need would be kind of shifted elsewhere. Now, in other research that we've done, we have seen that the pot of school impact fees basically has been untouched by the Department of Education for a very long time. There are funds into which the School Impact Fees Collective have been deposited. Those funds have steadily increased in size. There hasn't been much, if anything, spent out of them. There also were funds from the previous edition of the School Impact Fee Law called Fair Share Contributions that existed 14 years ago. A lot of that money still hasn't been touched. So we think perhaps a better use of this committee's time would be to get rid of the school impact fee program entirely, exempt it for everybody. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from the Hawaii School Facilities Authority.
Good afternoon, Ricky Fujitani with the School Facilities Authority. We support this exemption. We feel that it doesn't make sense for another state agency to take fees from another for schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the testifiers we've gotten signed up for today. Anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1088? If not, questions, members? I have a question. Oh, Representative Shimizu?
Thank you, Chair. Question for DHHL, please. Has DHHL done any calculations on what your anticipated savings would be with this waiving of the impact fees?
Well, I don't have I'm sorry, I don't have that amount, but we can try and calculate it. But as I mentioned, we do make lands available. We actually have provided close to 20 different sites for school facilities throughout our lands. Obviously, that's a very important part of our communities is school facilities. We work with Kamehameha Schools, we work with Punana Leo, work with all kind of different groups to provide facilities for education. And we're actually in the process of working with Kamehameha Schools to provide additional sites for their preschools as well as their resource centers that they put on our lands, as well as a cultural learning center in Nanakuli. So it's not something we ignore. We actually help facilitate. But we do like to have a kind of a cultural bend to it, and that's why Kamehameha Schools and some of these Punana Leo, that's kind of more in line with our cultural perspective.
Right. I saw that in your testimony. That was very helpful. So I guess a related question would be, has there been any discussion to kind of negotiate, quote, your credit for all of this provisions that you are actually providing a provision to satisfy an impact fee, so to speak, because you're doing it in advance, maybe?
Well, one of the ways we try to, rather than going for credit, we do work with the DOE in certain cases where on the infrastructure, especially if they're looking at a site to put in a school, we'll try to maybe accommodate and put in sub-outs or, access roads or what have you that can facilitate that kind of construction. But with respect to credits, no, we don't really go after credits.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Any other questions? I have a question, Kali. Have you provided sites for the Hawaii Public School System facilities?
Yes, we have. I can give you a list.
Because the list you gave is mostly Kamehameha Schools, Aha Punana Leo, which are great facilities, great programs, but it's not the Hawaii Public School System.
Right. Well, it's kind of, we do have charter schools. I see
a couple of charter schools on here.
Right.
So I guess that would be good, so we're not, so we're really clear, because the school impact fees would go to the Department of Education.
Department of Education, right.
And so it'd be good to know what you provided to the Department of Education. The other question is, what have you paid so far in school impact fees? That would be good to know.
I'd have to get that info.
Right, but if you're asking for, just realistically, if you're asking to be exempted from them, it would be good for you to be able to say, this is how much we've paid already to date.
Sure.
And then it'd also be good for you to say, this is what we estimate we would save if we're exempted from it.
Okay.
If this committee decides to move it forward, it's going to Finance Committee, they should know that information. It would be good for them to know that information. If you could provide that to them, that would be very important.
Sure, that makes sense.
And I would appreciate that if you would prepare for that. Any other questions, members? Yes, Representative Peruso.
For SFA, please. So it's my understanding that the impact fees are meant to provide for new construction of schools. So it's not meant to go to the repair and maintenance. It's not meant to go to deferred maintenance. It's really just meant for new schools. Is that correct?
Right, so the impact fee law is kind of bifurcated at the moment. The policy is set by the Board of Education, yet implementation is by the SFA, so that's challenging. It's purely for new, so it can't be to repair something. It has to be for a new school. And of course, new schools are few and far between, and as a result, very little money has been spent on the
So
impact
that's
fee
the
program.
reason that that money hasn't been spent down, is that we aren't constructing as many new schools
Right,
as
so as
we should be?
the tax foundation said, you know, right now there's a balance of $20 million that has accrued since the beginning of the impact fee program. To date, none of those funds have ever been expended. And it's very prescriptive. There has to be a nexus of the collection of the fee to where it was spent. So for example,
So it has to be like within the same complex area, or?
exactly, there's a
Okay.
nexus for, so like if you build a school in Kapolei, it's the impact fees from Kapolei, which probably at this time totals about $7 million. It doesn't get you much for a new school, right? Similarly for West Maui, it has to be a new school in West Maui, not a replacement school, not a school that has been replaced as a result of the wildfires. New school in Central Maui, that's a perfect example that where we can use impact fees collected from Central Maui. There's a nexus, and it'll be used for the building of the new school in Central Maui.
Perfect. Thank you so much for helping me understand. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? If not, thank you very much to the testifiers. We'll move on to the next measure, House Bill 1496, relating to education. This measure establishes the position of Kapapahana Kaiapuni Program Complex Area Superintendent. Requires that at least one at-large member of the Board of Education be a Hawaiian educator, practitioner, or scholar of Hawaiian studies or the Hawaiian language, to be selected from a list of 3 nominees submitted by the President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and clarifies purpose and objective of the Hawaiian Language Medium Education Program. First up, we have the Department of Education.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Tammy Chun, Deputy Superintendent. The Department of Education supports the intent of this bill. I wanted to highlight a couple of points since the bill has several parts. So the first part is that Kaipuni education, so education in the Hawaiian medium, has grown over the years. The number of schools, the number of students participating has increased. The Department of Education is currently in a strategic planning process regarding Kaipuni education. We're currently developing an implementation plan, which will include a resource plan. So providing that context to say that we appreciate the reference to adding a complex area superintendent in the bill and funding that position. However, we would request that we be given a little bit more time, and we would come back at a later point, perhaps next year in the supplemental budget, to ask for the position, since we're not complete with the process of planning yet. And then the second is regarding the seat for the Board of Education for a Hawaiian educator, scholar, or practitioner. So the process that's described in the bill is complicated, and so we anticipate that could be problematic the way it's written right now. Currently, individuals who meet the qualifications that are described in the bill have been nominated to the Board of Education and been served on the Board of Education. So we currently do have people that meet the description of the bill without having that be a requirement of the law. So individuals can, or organizations can, encourage people to apply, and people can already be nominated, recommended to the governor, or apply to be a member of the Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person that said they wanted to testify is Kanani Nohea Makaimoku with Aha Kauleo on Zoom. Please proceed.
Aloha mai kākou, e luna ho'omalu Tarnes, hope luna ho'omalu poipoe a me nā lala hano o Komike. My name is Kanani Nohea Makaimoku, representing the Aha Kauleo Statewide Council for the Papahana Kaiapuni. We strongly support HB 1496 and would like to add comments to our written testimony to propose the following 2 amendments. First, in Section 3, Of the at-large members appointed pursuant to paragraph 5, at least one member shall be we like to add proficient Hawaiian speaking educator, practitioner, or scholar of Hawaiian studies and the Hawaiian language. And the second amendment that we'd like to propose is the superintendent of education, with the approval of the board, shall appoint complex area superintendents for schools, including, we'd like to add a proficient Hawaiian language speaking complex area superintendent for Papapahana Kaiapuni schools. Hawaii's public education system is built upon 2 official language pathways, English and Hawaiian. However, while English medium education benefits from established leadership structures and systemic support, Hawaiian medium education remains critically underrepresented at the BOE and DOE levels. This lack of representation impacts policy decisions, resource allocation, and program sustainability. We strongly urge the committee to pass HB 1496, which will provide the necessary structural support to ensure equity, sustainability, and long-term success for Hawaiian medium education. Mahalo for this opportunity to testify. E ola ka olelo Hawaii.
Mahalo. Next person that said they wish to testify is Mele Kaneali'i on Zoom. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Poi Poi, and members of the committee. My name is Mele Kaneali'i, and I'm a proud product of the Kaiapuni program from preschool and kindergarten to high school at Ohine Kamalama, and I am testifying in strong support of HB 1496. My experiences in schools on Maui and Molokai have highlighted disparities in financial resources between the areas, and HB 1496 is an important step toward ensuring that every Kaiapuni student, regardless of location, has equal oversight and access to opportunities in an environment that nurtures their culture and language. This bill is urgent due to ongoing uncertainty around federal funding, particularly from the U.S. Department of Education, and Kaiapuni programs depend on a mix of state, federal, and category funding to operate. But with shifting federal leadership, this funding is increasingly unstable. And without protections and additional leadership positions mentioned in the legislation, the programs could be vulnerable to shift in funding priorities that might jeopardize their long-term sustainability. I would also like to provide a quick comment on the concern from our state's Board of Education about numerous stakeholders who may also be interested in gaining a dedicated seat on the board, as mentioned in their written testimony. I believe it's important to recognize and make the distinction that Kaiapuni schools are not just any stakeholders. They represent a unique and essential branch of our public education system rooted in the state constitution. These programs are tied to the language of the land, and they carry cultural, historical, and linguistic significance that cannot be compared to other educational interests. It's critical that the voices of these communities involved in these programs are represented at the highest levels of educational policymaking. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify. E ola ka olelo Hawaii.
Mahalo. There are 76 testifiers in support and none in opposition, and 3 giving comments. That's all that have said they wish to testify in person. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on House Bill 1496? If not, questions, members. Representative Shimizu.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Board of Education.
Department of Education?
Department of Education. Excuse me. The question is, how many of these Hawaiian language schools are there?
So in the Department of Education, we have 22 schools that have Kaiapuni programs. 2 of the schools are standalone K-12 programs, and then the others are school within school. So they have a program within the school.
Okay. Can I get a follow-up, Chair? From your testimony, I heard you say you were analyzing, or the department was analyzing, and you needed more time for this analysis. So it made me feel like you had concerns if this was implemented before that one-year period. So could you share what those concerns might be?
So there's 2 different parts of the bill that refer to the Kaiapuni education. So one is creates a definition of Kaiapuni, and so that just needs clarification. I think it refers to a complete education, and there are many different interpretations of what a complete education is. Just in the last week, I've had 3 different conversations with different interpretations. So I just think that part needs clarification. The second part, which is what I spoke about earlier, was about creating a complex area superintendent specifically for our Kaipuni schools. So a complex area superintendent would typically supervises schools and be the line supervisor of principals. Because we have a number of schools that have a Kaipuni program and an English program on the same campus, we still have to work out what does that mean that there's a complex area superintendent responsible for Kaipuni schools when only 2 of our schools are fully Kaipuni in terms of being K-12 Kaipuni, no English medium program. So I think we just need to clarify what that means in terms of the governance aspect. So I don't think there's an opposition. I think we just need a little more time to sort out what the responsibilities would be.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? If not, thank you to the testifiers. Let's move on to the next measure, House Bill 616, relating to the safety of educational workers. This measure requires the Department of Education and public charter schools to take certain steps to report incidents of harassment and implement procedures for handling harassment of educational workers. First up, we have the Department of Education.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Elizabeth Higashi, the Assistant Superintendent, speaking on behalf of the Department of Education. The department stands on its written testimony, which provides comments on this measure. To summarize some of those comments, one of the things that we definitely wanted to take a deeper look at is in regards to the potential unconstitutional use of public funds when we look at reimbursing educational workers for the temporary restraining orders. Another piece that we definitely would like closer examination of is reporting of alleged harassment on behalf of the department. We do have concerns in regards to that the harassment should be reported directly from the individual versus the department, because reports made by a third party on an employee's behalf could be considered hearsay and could cause for further misinformation and confusion amongst the case. I think definitely the last piece that we just wanted to point out is in regards to the unfunded mandates component, in regards that potential training for employees, serving the temporary restraining and the leave are things that we definitely would need support with funding. On that, I will end our testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, the Attorney General.
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Attorney General Gavin Tom, appearing on behalf of the Office of the Attorney General, and we provide comments as follows. As you know, this bill requires the Department of Education and public charter schools to take certain steps to report incidents of harassment or educational workers and implement procedures for handling harassment of educational workers. As indicated in our written testimony, some of these rights are mandatory subjects of negotiation and/or conditions of employment pursuant to Section 89-9, subsection A of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. The Department recommends the amendments as indicated in our written testimony for consistency among statutes, as well as the negotiation process. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on this bill. I'm available to answer or relay any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Next, Lindsay Chambers.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Poipoi, and members of the committee. I stand on my written testimony, but also wanted to provide some additional comments. It is absolutely outrageous that someone has been able to accumulate 30 TROs filed against them, the majority by educational workers, including myself. This issue has spread unchecked from one employee to another, from campus to campus, and has continued for more than a decade. Let me provide some perspective from the court. During my first TRO hearing, Judge Hilary Gagnes addressed my perpetrator, and her words reflected in the hearing minutes were, "Let me just give you the bottom line. Most people have no TROs against them ever in their entire lives." The argument made by the DOE and AG that these incidents are private matters and that providing legal support or remedies to employees who are harassed and abused would be an unconstitutional use of public funds is a clear example of institutional betrayal. Unfortunately, this misguided perspective comes as no surprise. During my ordeal, Supervising Attorney General James Halverson sent me a letter 9 months after Judge Richard Deal granted my injunction against harassment, where he states, "Your perpetrator's nasty and vulgar attacks on you and other employees who interact with him regarding his children's education are unfortunately part of the duties of HIDO employees involved with his children's education. This dismissive attitude only reinforces the department's refusal to protect its workers from harassment, despite the fact that it is happening because of our positions and work within the DOE. The department seems to believe it is exempt from its obligation to protect its workers simply because the perpetrator is a community member. However, should the rights and safety and well-being of our teachers and staff be treated as secondary to the perpetrators that continue to harass and abuse them? In my written testimony, I provided insight into state policy and precedent from the Department of Human Resources Development regarding workplace violence protections, regardless of the perpetrator. Last session, when I testified on the predecessor bill to HB 616, I was asked why a law is necessary. My response is, when the executive branch fails to protect its employees, laws are not just necessary, they're essential. They are the only way to ensure accountability and protect both teachers and students. If we do not force the DOE to address this ongoing issue, there will be more victims. It is time for the Department of Education and the state to stop failing those who dedicate themselves to our children's future. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have testimony from Inger Stonehill on Zoom. Please proceed. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, hi, thank you so much. Yes, good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and the committee members. My name is Inger Stonehill. I've been an educator since 2005. I'm still in Department of Education. So yes, I stand on my written testimony, but my summary for this bill. It's a critical bill designed to address the growing issue of violence, harassment, and threats against educators. Research reveals a surge in violent encounters post-pandemic, leading to increased stress and anxiety among school staff. Experts emphasize the urgent need for policy action. HB 616 provides essential protections by ensuring accountability, clear response procedures, and proactive safety measures. For myself, when I started in 2005, I never had any problems with any parents. Sure, been called names, but yes, like Ms. Chambers says, oh, I understood that maybe that was part of my job. But in 2022, 23, no, that was enough when I had threats against my life. So some of what I found in my research, teachers reported violent encounters with parents increased from 1% to pre-pandemic to 26% post-pandemic. That's a pretty big jump. And then the mental health impact, and now this is a nationwide statistic, nearly 70% of school staff report frequent stress and anxiety. That's including me. I had to go to psychiatrist and get on medication for anxiety. I am no longer on that, thank you, but that was a really tough time. Okay, so with that, we wanted to create some kind of response to that and some kind of guideline, because it is not consistent in the different schools that I have been at. We wanted to mandate investigations into harassment, require reporting of physical threats within 48 hours, develop emergency safety plans for at-risk educators, and as always, provide continuing annual training on de-escalation and harassment prevention. And I say those things because I experienced that, sure, I went for 3 TROs and I had to do it myself with no help. I called the police myself 3 times with no encouragement by my administration. And, we just want to have something that is consistent across all the schools, so the teachers feel safe, and then consequently the students, because our educators, us educators, show up for our children every day. Now it's time we show up for them. So I would like for you to consider to pass this bill to help us out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stonehill. That's all the testifiers that said they wish to testify in this measure. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify in House Bill 616? If not, questions, members? I have a question for the Department of Education. Last session, we heard a bill, a very similar bill. I had gotten assurances from the superintendent and the attorney general that you would work together to figure out a way to move forward without legislation. Great assurances that it was going to move forward. I'm reading testimony from one of the testifiers that you did some work, but it was poorly communicated, inconsistent, and doesn't seem to have done much. It doesn't seem to have had much impact on the DOE campuses. Could you tell us what you've done? Because we shouldn't have to deal with this here. I'm appalled that we're still back where we were a year ago. So could you tell us what you've done?
So since last session, we did meet with Ms. Chambers, Mr. Whitwer, and Ms. Stonehill, and we thank you for their input in regards to things that we needed to improve in our policies. Things that we have done was we did work with the AG's office, and we are currently in progress in providing TRO resources that we're hoping to release shortly. We also released a visitor code of conduct that we developed in collaboration with our AG's office. The visitor code of conduct was released this fall, and definitely with the conduct, we issued out a letter that went out to all of our families, and we also made a poster in addition to social media package that we had our schools display. I do acknowledge that from hearing from Ms. Chambers and the others, there are things that we need to continue to do in advertising and pushing out this visitor code of conduct. One of the things that we are appreciative, we have seen some effectiveness with the conduct because we have had some cases, because harassment has still continued, where because of the code of conduct, with some of our community members and families, we were able to reference the conduct, issue letters, and set strict guidelines on communication. And also in regards to that, to set parameters and making it clear to some of those people who have violated the conduct that they could be trespassed from our campus and that we could also start to block and limit their communication with the schools. So we do understand that we are a little delayed and in the fall that late, but we are starting to see that because of that conduct, we are able to mitigate some of those harassment issues that are happening on our campuses. In addition, we do know that Ms. Chambers brought to our attention the deheard policy, and we've evaluated it from our last hearing. And we do see that there are pieces and components of it that we need to take a look at our own workplace violence policies, and we can take structures from it to improve ours. So we are definitely right now in progress in regards to evaluating how we can have clearer guidelines, policies, and looking at that policy recommendation, how we can have that ready for when we start the next school year or as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. One of the things that we talked about last year as well is that you had an inability, the department had an inability of finding a process server who would serve papers to a particularly problematic individual who had many TROs against that person. And I was assured that you were going to follow up and be able to do that. Has that been done?
My apologies, I don't know. I personally don't know, but that's something we can definitely follow up and report back to you on.
I spoke with both the superintendent and the attorney general about this, and you just got to get someone who's good at it, because if somebody wants to avoid being served papers, they hide, they do whatever. But there's ways that it can be delivered. And it seems like the DOE has been slow walking this. This has not been a real active effort to address it, and it doesn't seem like it's an urgent business that Department of Human Resources Development emphasizes that it should be. That's just my impression from what I am observing from what's happened in this last 12 months. Questions, members? Any other questions? No. I appreciate you following up on these things, and this committee really takes this seriously. We want to protect our educational workers, and we think that you should want to protect your educational workers too. And I know you care for them, but you've got to translate that into policies that really do protect them.
Understandable, Chair, and we'll definitely follow up with you regarding the process servers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, we've got one question here. Representative Barroso.
Sorry, my question is for Ms. Chambers.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for appearing before this body today. And I know that this has been a long process for you. And I'm wondering if you have received any kind of support after leaving the department from the department with respect to this kind of, not just changing policy moving forward, but also with respect to your particular situation? Was there any kind of remedy or settlement or any kind of support for you?
There's been no support. I mean, I appreciate the acknowledgement that we were able to meet with the DOE regarding the code of conduct, but that was after a lot of advocating and fighting for a seat at the table for myself and other victims. It was not done willingly or proactively. But I made the personal decision to leave the department, pull my daughter out of the department for her own safety, and find my own way to heal from this on my own.
I'm sorry to hear that. And the reason I asked that question is because you're not a unionized employee, or you were not at the time. You were an exempt employee, correct? Because you're the communications director?
Correct, but I did enlist the help of HGA when it got really bad, and they were a huge support, helped me with the possibility of filing a lawsuit. But I'm sure, as you all know, on the Judiciary Committee, it is not easy to go through a lawsuit, especially against the state. It's not something that someone who wants to move on and heal does,
Right.
want to go through.
I appreciate your perseverance and your willingness to speak for others. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions, members? If not, thank you very much to all the testifiers, and we'll move on to the next measure. House Bill 329, relating to the School Facilities Authority. This measure clarifies that the School Facilities Authority is responsible for certain development, planning, and construction projects for pre-kindergarten, preschool, and child care facilities, as well as workforce housing. Authorizes the School Facilities Authority to develop workforce housing for teachers on land not owned by the DOE, and allows the School Facilities Authority to use the Department of Education for certain recruitment and hiring responsibilities, and partner with public and private development agencies to develop pre-kindergarten facilities. First up, we have Office of Information Practices with comments. Next, Department of Budget and Finance with comments. Next, Department of Education.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Poi Poi, members of the committee, Sean Bacon, Assistant Superintendent for the Department of Education. The department stands on its written testimony providing comments. One of the things that we wanted to point out is on page 7 of the bill, lines 15 and 16, it talks about that the SFA shall use either the Department of Education or the Department of Human Resources Development for the recruitment. We're recommending that it should be one or the other, not both. I think it could just add to some confusion in the field if DHERD and DOE were posting the same position at the same time. So we'd recommend that it be one or the other in there. We'll be available for any other comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, the Attorney General's office.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Poi Poi, members. Randall Watt, Deputy Attorney General for the Department of the Attorney General. Department offers comments on this bill. As outlined in our written testimony, the Department recommends 3 revisions to the House Draft 1. First, on page 2, line 18, to align with the terminology used in Section 302L7 HRS and to clarify that the workforce housing is for public employees, the Department suggests replacing pre-kindergarten with public pre-kindergarten programs and public preschools. Second, on page 3, lines 11, 13, to clarify that workforce housing is for educators and other education workers in public schools, that is inclusive of DOE schools and public charter schools. The Department suggests revising that part to state workforce housing for educators and other education workers in public schools serving elementary and secondary grades. And lastly, to effectuate the legislative intent of this bill, we suggest revising Section 302A, 1128 HRS, to include excluding pre-kindergarten classrooms after the line that says, finishes with, at which the Executive Office of Early Learning administers programs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I am available for questions.
Thank you very much. Next, Ricky Fujitani, Hawaii School Facilities Authority.
Good afternoon, thank you. The School Facilities Authority is a startup agency, and the enabling legislation has been compounded with a series of acts that gives us a multitude of missions. This bill seeks to clarify and simplify that specifically in our enabling legislation. And it should just, the changes should just be concentrated specifically in 302A 1703, which is where our powers are. There's a risk that as more people comment, we're changing statutes from all over the place that causes confusion and complexity. Again, our recommendation and in our testimony is to specifically just affect our statute, clarifying our roles and responsibilities in our enabling legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there, let's see, is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 329? If not, questions, members? Yes, Representative Peruso.
SFA, please. So I'm curious about the part of legislation that talks about building DOE schools on property that's not owned by the DOE. And I am assuming that you mean public land that's not owned or controlled by the DOE, but does this legislation envision building on private land?
No.
Okay.
Not at all, yeah. So any land we build on is public lands, or if it is private lands, it gets transferred to the DOE or the SFA through the impact fee process.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? If not, we'll move on to the next measure. House Bill 739 relating to housing. This measure establishes the Kama'aina Homes Program to provide funding to the counties to purchase voluntary deed restrictions from eligible homeowners or home buyers. First up, we have the Department of Transportation via Zoom or in person. Not present. Next, Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members. We stand in our testimony in support. We appreciate the program's efforts to create a local housing market for Hawaii residents.
Thank you. Next, Department of Taxation. Thanks for coming up to the podium.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members. The Department of Taxation stands on its written testimony with two comments. One is that if this bill should pass, could it take effect on January 1st, 2026 to allow us to make the changes? And also a small language to clarify that the exemption not only applies to the conveyance of the land, but the conveyance of the deed restriction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Tax Foundation of Hawaii, Tom Yamachika. Not present. Next, Hawaii Realtors, Ms. Garcia, welcome.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Garcia from Hawaii Realtors. So this is a measure that was very similar to one that was passed by this committee last week. We are supportive of the idea. The only concern that I wanted to highlight from our testimony is that the deed restriction would be in perpetuity, which could mean decades from now, hundreds of years from now. And so we're open to other timelines to consider for the deed restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We received written testimony from AARP, but I wondered if we want to have oral testimony. Yes, okay, because you didn't sign up for it, so I thought I'd ask. But I saw you there, and I thought, well, I should ask. Welcome. Please proceed.
I appreciate the consideration. Thank you, Chair Tarnas and Vice Chair Poipoi and members of the committee. I'm Kaylee Lopez. I'm the State Director for AARP Hawaii, and we stand in strong support of this legislation. You have my testimony in front of you. You know, this issue of challenges for local residents to be able to live in these beautiful islands in their home has been really 40 years in the making. Now is the time for bold action. You all, most of you weren't born maybe, but were very young when this all started. Many of us are at the point in our lives where we cannot afford to have our children move away. And what I mean by that is many kupuna rely on family members to care for them. My mother, who needed 24/7 care, had 2 daughters, a daughter-in-law, a grandson, a great-grandson, who all lived here and could care for her. So she was able to live in her home in Nanakuli Hawaiian Homestead and be in the comfort of some familiar surroundings and familiar people. If our young people keep leaving, not only do we have issues with our workforce, but we have an issue with the future of what it's going to mean to be able to keep families together, to care for one another. It is time the legislature, this is only one of many approaches, right, to address the issue of housing, but it's a bold one, it's a necessary one, and I really encourage you to open your hearts, but mostly importantly, your minds to see how this really does begin to make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Susan Lay, Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice. Not present online? Nope, okay, not present. Testimony and support. Next, Housing Hawaii's Future, Perry Aerosmith.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Housing Hawaii's Future stands in strong support of this measure. We saw some of the language that was proposed by DOTAX and Holomua Collaborative. We support that language as well. We want this program to work. We support the generation of locals-only workforce housing, and we believe that this program can accomplish just that. So we humbly urge you to advance this measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was a good intro. The next person, Holomua Cooperative. Mr. Wish.
Chair Tarnas, thank you very much. Josh Wish with Holomua Collaborative. Just for, as you've always said, for anyone who is watching, just a quick kind of layperson's description of what the bill basically does is essentially the government would, under this program, provide payments to people who are buying or who already own homes in exchange for an agreement to ensure that those homes permanently stay available for local families who are in the area. It's laser focused on providing workforce housing. And just one thing to note, some additional numbers to underscore the incredibly personal story that Keali'i shared, is our related organization, Holomua Collective, put out a survey late last year where we surveyed 1,500 residents about cost of living issues, and one of the questions we asked was, do you think you're going to need to move to a less expensive state? And 70% almost said either yes or I'm unsure. Almost half of those said they're going to have to move within the next 5 years. And about 2/3 of those said the driver of that decision was the cost of housing, which is one of the reasons why we think this is so important. It's also a proven solution. It has been rolled out successfully in other jurisdictions that face similar challenges that we have. It's also a really efficient use of government funding. When you look at the local housing that you are locking up for the cost that it provides. And finally, it provides some hope that we're actually doing something, kind of along the lines of what Keali'i said. It's not the single bullet solution, nothing is, but I think this also works really well with a lot of the other initiatives that the legislature is already looking at this year. So last thing I'll note is, as Perry had noted, we did put in some suggested amendments that we had been discussing with the introducer, Rep. Evslin, who I believe has discussed it with the AGs. Many of them were meant to address some of the questions that the AGs had previously brought up. My understanding is that that would satisfy most of their concerns. With that, I'll sit down, but thank you so much for considering this and moving along. I'm here for any questions you've got.
Thank you very much. Next, Sam Dorios.
Hi, I'm obviously in very big support of this no-brainer bill, which I hope you all, the committee, considers. I'm going to give two anecdotal stories to talk about the breadth and the depth of this problem. I work for something called the Hawaii Leadership Forum. I do something called systems mapping, and basically that's where we get a complex problem and we map it, why the problem exists and how to tackle the problem and how to change it. So I've done maps, oh God, I've worked here for 9 years doing systems mapping, and I've done maps on homelessness, health, education, you name it. Housing always comes up. It's such a big problem here. It affects, I did a map on Alice, asset limited income constrained employed, obviously was a huge, huge problem for the Alice population. Education, you have families living in multi-generation homes. Families are working hard to pay the rent. They don't have time to help their children study and excel. Health, you have a family living in a moldy old shack they can't fix and they can't keep it clean because they don't have the money and the time to do so. Look at the houses. How old are the houses in Hawaii? And a lot of them are not in good shape. And it all comes back to housing costs. And so that's like the breadth of the issue. I want this committee to know that when they tackle this issue, they are tackling something that hurts a lot of different departments, not just the one you guys are focused on. The other thing regarding the depth of this, I work for the Hawaii Leadership Forum, which is a wonderful company. They're very good to me. I have a master's degree. I'm educated. I don't spend a lot of money. I'm very thrifty. I don't have any debt. I've never taken out a loan. I have a good amount of savings. Me and my wife have been trying to find housing for the past year or so. My wife is a tenured professor at UH. She's communications. So we have a tenured professor and me, and we are struggling to try to make housing work. We've had serious conversations of, do we leave? And we're committed to staying. But when you have a tenured professor and her husband who works for a good company, we have good jobs, struggling, I can only imagine what other families in Hawaii are going through. So please really consider doing something about this. Apologies, I don't think this is bold action, but at least it's something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. Next, we have testimony from Maggie Ann Engerbretson. Not present. That's all the testifiers that we've gotten on this bill. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? Yes, please, come on up and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Suzanne Schuld. I'm with Aloha United Way, and Aloha United Way and the Alice Initiative stand in strong support of this bill. We are the authors of the Alice report that have been referenced in some of the other testimony. And while our numbers are slightly different than what Holomua came out, we saw the exact same problem, that a huge amount of households, when asked, are considering to leave Hawaii. And when we dug in deeper, 73% of them said the cost of living or accessible housing is the primary reason that they're leaving. 3 out of 4 of those folks, which translates to about 184,000 people in our state, are considering leaving in the next 12 months. To tag on to what the previous testifier said, I can also say that we just had our closest friends just left. Same thing, attorney and tenured professor. They just moved to Massachusetts, not known for cheap housing, because they put offers on 8 houses. They make good income, but they kept losing to cash buyers who do not live here. And this bill opens up housing for people who we do not think of as struggling individuals, but who are struggling to fight against, in a whole different playing field of money that they cannot compete with. Aloha United Way is very strong in saying that to solve our housing crisis, we're going to need to look at solutions that put housing for residents, that residents who live and work here are living in. We cannot build our way out of this crisis. This is the type of bill that we need. I agree with others, we do need more, but this type of work is critically important, and I strongly hope that this committee will pass this bill. It's innovative, it puts residents first, and it's really important. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. If you could provide your name to our staff, just because I hadn't gotten your name.
Of course. Suzanne Schuld. Oh.
You could write it down for her, that'd be great. That way we have the record of all the testifiers. Anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? 739. If not, questions, members. Representative Peruso.
Question for Perry or for Josh. So it's about who has done the most analysis of how this has played out in other jurisdictions?
One thing I can, and Perry, if you've got anything else, jump in. One thing I can tell you right off the cuff is, so Vail has had it going for a few years so far, the Vail Indeed program.
Yeah.
I think in the time that they've done it, I think they have secured about 175 homes through deed restrictions for, I think, a total of about $12 million investment. I think it came out to about a $70,000 or so average per deed restriction. Using slightly different but similar numbers, I think Appleseed in their testimony actually had a really, and by the way, they'd meant to be here, but they got caught up in something else. They had a really good comparison that I think as of like 2020, Vail might have done something like 150 deed-restricted homes for about $10 million. And they noted that there was also a building that was bought for 288 homes for $200 million by the city at the same time, which is what I was getting to with the efficiency of government resources point.
I guess I hadn't really asked my question yet, but my question was, you are kind of going to the point, is about the kinds of resources we would need to invest to make a discernible impact.
Sure.
So I'm wondering at like the numbers that we're talking about. So you gave me some numbers for Vail. That's a completely different kind of jurisdiction than the state of Hawaii.
Sure.
So do we have numbers for this bill? For the amount that we're supposed to use for purchase of deed restrictions?
I think the amount, I think, is, so the way that we currently have it set up is that it's going through the dwelling unit revolving fund. So that HHFDC would be able to utilize DERF to be able to offer deed restrictions under this program. So that's the way that it's currently structured. We also know, for instance, that penalties from the program would go back into DERF for anyone who is violating the program. And the other thing I'd note is, in terms of effectiveness, Vail's median home price is actually, hard as this is to believe, higher than ours. Last time I checked, I think Vail's median home price was $1.8 million. And I think on Oahu, for instance, we're at about $1.1 million. Statewide, it's about $800,000. So I think there's good reason to believe, based on that evidence, that it would go pretty far here.
I guess, so I'm hearing that you don't really have a number to kind of attach to this measure.
Well, there's not a specific number as in terms of like an appropriation line item, but that's because the way that the bill is currently structured, it doesn't technically need one because...
But, yeah, so I guess my question, I understand that it's coming from DERF.
Okay.
Yeah, I get that. But I'm wondering, from your analysis, what kind of investment would we need to make in this kind of work to make a discernible impact?
Well, so that's where we can take a look at some of the other jurisdictions to see what they've done. I think when Vail started, I think they, in their case, I think they started off with something like a $5 million investment. And then they wanted to see how it would work. The program, if memory serves, got pretty quickly oversubscribed, and then they started putting more appropriations into it. The other thing that I think is worth noting, Rep, is that what it also created a bit of a snowball effect in Vail from my discussions with some of the folks over there, so that people then started almost creating a bit of a culture of these deed restrictions where they wanted to get involved in restricting more homes for local families. And I think on the Vail and Deed program website, for instance, I believe it says that they have something like 1,000+ deed restrictions to date that are even outside of the program itself, because this started going into that kind of momentum, including apparently new developments that were built that were deed restricted as they were being built. So there's the straight up investment. I think they started with 5 and it grew from there. And then there was kind of the add-on effect from everybody who wanted to get involved afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair, for your patience.
Sure. Good questions. Always good questions from our members here. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we will move on. Thank you very much to the testifiers. Next measure, HB 745, relating to building codes. This measure states, beginning on the date of the International Code Council 2024 suite of published codes is adopted as Hawaii State Building Code makes the most recent Hawaii State Building Codes adopted by the State Building Code Council supersede all existing county building codes, and thereafter allows counties to amend the Hawaii State Building Code as it applies within their jurisdiction. The measure also repeals the county's authority to adopt, amend, and update the Hawaii State Building Codes for their respective county building codes. So it repeals their ability, but it actually allows them as well. That's the way the bill is written. But the counties still end up being able to amend the code. Okay, HB 745, first up, we have Fire Chief Kazuo Todd in support. Next, Department of Public Works, County Hawaii, in comments. Next, Department of Planning and Permitting, City and County of Honolulu, comments. Next, Kika Bukowski, IBEW. Welcome, sir. Please proceed.
Chair, Vice Chair, committee members, Kika Bukowski on behalf of IBEW 1260. We stand on a written testimony in strong opposition. We'd just like to add and emphasize that although we support streamlining the process, we understand that it can be cumbersome. The way the bill is written is fairly ambiguous, and we're not sure exactly to the extent that this will actually achieve the intent. We believe that it could be interpreted to allow counties to circumvent state building codes and minimum standards, which we feel runs contrary to the intent of minimum standards and codes. Building codes and standards are for the protection of public health and safety. And given the last bill that we just heard, we definitely support affordable homes, but we don't believe that your level of income should dictate how safe your home is. And we feel that measures like this may tend to put people with lesser means in lesser safe homes. With that, we are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Grassroots Institute of Hawaii in support? On Zoom, Ted Kafelis? No? Is there anyone else here wishing to testify in this measure? Did you want to testify in this measure?
Good afternoon. Gordon Wood, Public Works Administrator for the Department of Accounting and General Services.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Yeah, and the department stands on its written testimony, offering comments, and respectfully requesting deferral of this measure.
Thank you. We don't see your testimony, so if you could check with our valiant staff over here to find it, because I didn't get it and I didn't get a chance to read it. Anyone else wishing to testify in HB 745? If not, questions, members? No. Did you?
Oh, I think I'm interested in DAG's position and wondering why they're wanting to defer.
Sir, could we have you come up for a question from Representative Bellotti?
Certainly.
Can you just explain further why you'd want this measure deferred?
Okay. We want this measure deferred because we are concerned that if it is passed, it will interfere with a different process that we have ongoing within the department to amend the codes for adoption once the Building Code Council is reactivated. And we are also concerned that as written, the measure might result in the adoption of unamended model codes. And without those amendments, the codes won't reflect Hawaii's unique geographic conditions, seismic loading, wind loading, and also the unamended codes don't address our cultural practices. In the past, the state building codes have been amended to allow indigenous buildings and building practices, and the model codes don't address any of that.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
Sir, did you testify in the earlier committee on this? I don't show any record of
I
your
don't
testimony.
believe that we did, no.
Your testimony is very important. I'm glad you came today.
I'm glad
because
too, yes.
we didn't get any written testimony, and the previous committee, the Housing Committee,
Okay.
Did not get any testimony from you.
I'll check with our legislative coordinator about that, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any questions? Any other questions, members? If not, thank you to all the testifiers for being here today. Let's move on to the next measure. House Bill 1433 relating to eviction mediation. This extends the period for a notice of termination of a rental agreement, requires landlords to engage in mediation and delay filing an action for summary possession if a tenant schedules or attempts to schedule mediation, and requires landlords to provide specific information in the 10 calendar day notice to tenants. First up, we have the judiciary.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members, Jeff Crabtree.
It's an honor to have you here, sir.
Oh, well.
Thanks for being here. Wow.
You're very kind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to just stand on a written testimony, but I heard your admonition at the start of the hearing that that's not allowed, so.
No, give us your highlights,
Just
please.
briefly, this measure would build on the success of the COVID mediation program under Act 57. It would build on the success that we see in court-ordered mediations statewide every year. And it'll just help us get to mediation faster than we currently are, and that's a good thing. So thank you. I'll be available for any questions.
And you suggested 30 days.
Yes, sir.
You want to explain that, please?
It's just in line with Act 57. It's also the same timeline we're using with the mediations on Maui right now, and it seems to be working okay.
And this is to initiate mediation or to
It's
complete
to
mediation?
It's to complete the mediation once it's scheduled, right, Tracy? Yes, once it's scheduled. So it gives the scheduling folks a 30-day window between the scheduled date and the actual completion date.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is that a 30-day period from the start of the mediation to the completion of the mediation?
Yes, sir.
Got it. Okay. Is there any, I guess that's really, is there any period of time that you would recommend that mediation start? Or is that just case by case?
Well, it's usually needs to be scheduled within 15 days.
Oh, and that's already in the statute? Or that's already in your process, not in the statute?
It's, right? Sorry?
What's that?
I'm checking with my subject matter expert over here because I'm sometimes getting things confused between bills.
So 15 days is in the bill to start mediation? Yes. Yes.
Scheduled within 15 days, then it's a full 30 days from the notice to mediate.
Got it.
So it doesn't make it go longer. It's 30 days total.
Yeah, and the goal of that is to help out the landlord because the landlord
Sure,
doesn't
sure.
want to process
So they have
it
to
just.
schedule to start mediation within 15 days, and then once started, it then has to be completed within 30 days.
30 days from the notice given to the tenant.
Oh, from the notice given to the tenant.
So basically it gives an additional 15 days. It's a total of 30 days.
Total of 30 days from the notice to the tenant. Okay. Thanks for the explanation, because I wasn't quite sure.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Tracy Wilchin, Mediation Center. Oh, you're the expert, so here we are. So tell us everything all over again.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I represent the Mediation Center of the Pacific. My name is Tracy Wilkin. I stand on my testimony, but I will add a few comments as well, since you encouraged that. I want to emphasize how important this bill is, because in addition to helping tenants and landlords, it's changing a culture. Right now, the culture is a tenant gets behind, they don't say anything to their landlord because they're scared, they're ashamed, they're overwhelmed. Landlords don't want to be bad people, so they wait. So the hole starts getting deeper and deeper. And we know this is a fact because some of the cases that we mediate from court, tenants are 4 months behind, sometimes more. And so there's no way that they're going to come up with a payment plan. And landlords are tacking on attorney's fees, so the hole gets bigger. With this program, it requires landlords to participate in mediation when tenants request it within 15 days. But our goal is to educate tenants to reach out early, as soon as they know they're going to have an issue. And so we're trying to change a culture and a mindset. Act 57 did that. When Act 57 was in place, I mean, people were forced, they were in mediation. But when Act 57 ended, landlords continued to mediate until they one day realized, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. And so it went back. We have an early eviction mediation program on Oahu that we continued to fund after Act 57 was so successful. And even though the numbers are lower because landlords aren't required to participate, we have a 90% rate of agreement for those cases that mediate early. So it's a really important bill, and I'd encourage you to pass it. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. You've helped us out a lot so far. Okay, next we have Ms. Garcia, Hawaii Realtors.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Garcia from Hawaii Realtors. Just echoing a lot of the comments from my colleagues here. We do support the intent of this measure and supports peaceful, expeditious mediation. We appreciate the willingness to want to complete mediation by 30 days. Our members would prefer, if it's possible, to be able to not delay, any of the court hearings, to be able to, if it's possible to have mediation be happening concurrently with the action for summary possession, that would be our preference, but we totally understand and appreciate everybody's willingness to compromise. The other thing that I do want to point out, if it is at all possible to include emergency rent relief, because this bill is for tenants who are unable to pay. So at the end of the day, even though mediation is helpful, if they're unable to pay, all we're doing is delaying the process and delaying the ability for other tenants to be able to seek housing by delaying the eviction process. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure, 1433? If not, questions, members? I have one question. How about for our expert? No offense, Mr. Crabtree, but. So on page 8, line 4, we have a blank number of days. Page 10, line 6, we have a blank number of days. But then on page 6, line 16, the number of days is 20. Should I just change them all to 30?
30. We're recommending 30. That's the number of days that was used during Act 57. That's the number of days that are being used currently for the Maui Mediation Services Early Eviction Mediation Program. So 15 days to schedule, 30 days to mediate.
Okay, on page 6, it says on line 16, basically, then the landlord shall only file an action for summary possession after the expiration of 20 calendar days following the tenant's receipt of the 10 calendar day notice, unless the tenant failed to attend. Should I leave that at 20, or should I
We can live with that, because we know that landlords some of the landlord attorneys were requesting that it be shortened. So,
Okay, so
we're fine with that as long as you pass the bill.
Okay, we'll leave that at 20, but we'll fill in the blanks at 30.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thanks for that explanation. Any other questions, members? Representative Shimizu.
Can I ask a question? Thank you, Chair. Can I ask a question to the previous testifier, please? Thank you. I guess my question is, what is the difference of just extending Act 57 versus passing this new bill?
The difference between Act 57 and this new bill, so Act 57 ended, obviously, back in 2022. It's the shorter dates. So in Act 57, it was 15 days to schedule the mediation. In this bill, it's 10 days. In Act 57, it was a total of 30 days to conduct the mediation before the landlord could move forward. This says 20 days, as you pointed out. And the reason was when this bill was originally submitted last year, we worked with attorneys and other stakeholders before it was submitted. And so that was their request, that the number of days be slightly reduced and that they could live with it. And I'm gathering that's why they're not testifying against it. And it didn't get passed last year because the focus, understandably and rightfully so, was on Maui. But that's the only difference.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thanks to all the testifiers. We'll move on to the next measure. House Bill 175 relating to property maintenance. This measure requires owners or lessees of real property to maintain their property and establishes penalty for failure to do so, with some exceptions. First up, we have Michael Walker, DLNR.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Walker. I serve as the statewide fire protection forester for the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife. The department has submitted testimony in support of this measure. The prior hearing of the bill, the department submitted testimony which was incorporated into House Draft 1, which the department appreciates. And we're available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, appreciate it. That's all the testifiers we've had sign up to testify on this measure. Is there anyone here who wishes to testify on HB 175? If not, questions, members? If not, we'll move on. Thank you very much. And, oh, wait, question, Mr. Shimizu.
Can I ask a question, DLNR? I was just wondering, in the process, in the current process, does the leaseholder have any communication from the department of any concerns or like a warning before they're served this 30 days and there's a countdown for a fine? And the concern is if there's sufficient communication, you know, good win-win relationship, and if 30 days might be a hardship for anyone, once they're like, it might be a surprise. I'm just trying to qualify the real-life occurrences.
Yeah, that's a good question, Representative Shimizu. The Department of Land and Natural Resources isn't included in this bill anymore in terms of any of the enforcement or notifications. So the question should probably be answered by the Department of Agriculture or the future Office of the State Fire Marshal. There could be something written there into the bill as a warning notification before any kind of official citation is implemented.
So no one here is able to answer that on their behalf? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Welcome.
Sure, thank you very much. Any other questions? If not, let's move on to the next measure. House Bill 1449 relating to plant care components. This measure authorizes the Department of Agriculture to adopt rules and establishes administrative penalties to establish and enforce the plant care component program. It appropriates funds and establishes positions for purposes of the plant care component program. First up, Chelsea Arnott, Hawaii Invasive Species Council. On Zoom? Not present. In support. Next, Hawaii Department of Agriculture. In person, in support.
Afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Jonathan Ho, Department of Agriculture. We stand on our written testimony in support, and thanks for the incorporation of our prior testimony comments. Thank you. I'm available for questions.
And just, could you summarize your testimony? Because you make some amendments, requests for amendments.
Yeah, so basically, there is a change in 141 to require that some of the stuff that's listed is not really, well, basically it's not necessary because the rules already have that language to do what the change seeks to do. That's basically what it is. It's not necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Next, Carol Kwan Consulting in support, and next, Hawaii Farm Bureau in support. Mr. Miyamoto, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You have our written testimony in support. We appreciate that this builds on Act 197 from last year. We are thrilled that it does provide funds for implementation and positions. LRB did a study. I think I've said this many times because we've been talking about invasive species way too much. That's a problem. LRB did a study in 2002 that estimated it would take $50 million a year to effectively address invasive species. That's 2002. The estimate right now with 2.5% inflation annually would bring it up to $88 million a year. So $20 million last year, which ended up being $10 million out of Act 231 is a great start. We need to protect Hawaii from these invasive species. So any tools, any mechanism, anything that this legislature can do to provide the Department of Agriculture and their partners assistance to protect farming, ranching, our fragile ecosystem, our environment and the people of Hawaii is essential. So this and all the invasive species bills unfortunately are necessary because we have so much invasive species. I was going to save it for our next testimony, but the estimate is 20 to 30 new species are introduced every year. Unless we protect our borders, the pests that we are addressing today and the ones from yesterday are going to be in addition to the ones of tomorrow. And if $88 million are price tag today, if we don't do anything different, that's going to be in the billions. And that's what brown tree snake is, right? And possibly red and ported fire ant. The impact to Hawaii is going to be in the billions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miyamoto. Anyone else wishing to testify on HB 1449? If not, questions, members? Yes, Vice Chair.
For Department of Ag. Thank you. This bill is a big lift for Department of Ag. Is the department confident that it will be able to successfully implement what the bill proposes?
So this bill, compared to a lot of the bills that have been introduced, this one is actually one of the smaller lifts, particularly because the bill enables the treatment to occur prior to entry. Before, the requirement was that it had to be treated after arrival, so we were chasing everything. So because it can be done before it arrives, it's because we already inspect this stuff, and I suspect that the majority of it will be treated prior to entry. We're not necessarily really changing a lot of our inspection procedures for it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Kahaloa.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question for the Department of Ag. Jonathan, can you explain a little, you put in your testimony that there were some FTE and position requirements to effectuate the bill?
Yes.
But can you tell me that in Act 231, we had positions for biosecurity overall?
Correct.
Not just in that bill, but hopefully in another biosecurity measure for 2025 and 2026. Do these positions overlap in any way or can be consumed into the biosecurity request funds?
Yeah, so right now, with the exception of my detector dog handlers, all the inspectors have the same position description. So for all intents and purposes, you can take an inspector from any island, put them on another island, they can do the inspections. So the people that are Act 231 positions, and with the exception, I think, of one of the, well, three, because there's two positions for admin and then one newer inspector position. The positions that I'm talking about here are the exact same series as what we have now. So they can, so when I did the estimate for the position numbers, I was looking at the possibility of having stuff treated here on island, just in case people, they miss it, or things like that. So the numbers basically are very small on the outer islands because the majority of it will be on Oahu. If it is on the other islands, you have somebody available just to manage that increase of inspections. And then with the Act 231 stuff, basically that's bringing the positions back up to, was it 2009 levels? So this is, again, a reasonable, I mean, we're not trying to get too many people, but a reasonable amount to make sure that this can be done timely. We're not going to be impeding commerce and things like that. So the position can be interspersed wherever. It won't be a problem for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Certainly. Vice Chair?
Is there any consideration to include an inspector for Molokai at the harbor?
So the Act 231, one of the positions is dedicated for Molokai. And the biggest challenge, I think, for us is actually getting the person up to the independent level. So as an Inspector 1, you are a trainee. You don't do any of the passing. You're basically there to learn a lot of the procedures and a lot of the nuance in terms of the inspection. That takes 6 months. As an Inspector 2, you're semi-independent, but you're basically working with a journeyman, Inspector 3. So getting past that 18-month period is going to probably be the biggest challenge for that particular position. And then also, I think managing the fact that a lot of the direct importation, so the first port of entry, doesn't go to Molokai. It's being done on another island.
Yeah, we don't have little fire ants yet. We don't have coconut rhinoceros, speedos, coqui frogs. But I mean, it's only a matter of time unless we have, also have biosecurity at our ports too.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we'll move on. Thanks very much to the testifiers. HB 427 relating to biosecurity. This has numerous parts. I'll summarize briefly. It renames the Department of Agriculture to the Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity, and renames the Board of Agriculture to the Board of Agriculture and Biosecurity, establishes and appropriates funds for Deputy Director of Biosecurity, changes references to the Plant and Animal Declaration Form to the Biosecurity Form, authorizes and specifies conditions under which the Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity may declare a biosecurity emergency, and broadens the objectives and general actions of the biosecurity program and appropriates funds for positions in the department. First up, we have the Department of Land and Natural Resources.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Rob Hoff, Division of Forestry and Wildlife for Don Chang. This afternoon, the department stands on some written testimony in comments, and just a brief summary of our comments. We definitely support the urgency of improving our biosecurity system in Hawaii. The only concern that we had, and I recognize that the current version of this bill doesn't move the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, but we are concerned that the best place for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council to be administered in the near term is through the Department of Land and Natural Resources. And we hope that, if the legislature determines that it should be centralized at the Department of Agriculture, they allow Department of Ag to develop capacity and in order to manage that, so the important collaborative work on invasive species continues in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoff. Department of Agriculture, do you want to testify on this too? Okay.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Jonathan Ho, on behalf of the department, we send our written testimony in support, and with the increased focus on biosecurity and increasing capacity, this is one of the major mechanisms to getting toward that ultimate level of really securing the state against the threats of pest and invasive species. I'm available for comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, Hawaii Invasive Species Council. Chelsea Arnott? Not present. Next, Brian Miyamoto, Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You have our written testimony in support. We thank the House Majority Caucus for making this a majority package bill. Shows how important it is. Also shows how important biosecurity is and the threat by renaming the Department of Agriculture. Vice Chair, this one's the big lift bill. This is really a big lift. It is. There's a lot of parts, and we understand that. But we appreciate the House Majority Caucus focusing on biosecurity and its impact, again, not just to agriculture, but to environment and to Hawaii in general. So unfortunately, we've become too familiar with invasive species that we started just using abbreviations. LFA, CRB, RRP, Roseland parakeet, BTS, brown tree snake, ROD. We got to stop this. And we believe this is a mechanism. This will focus our efforts by saying it's not just Department of Ag, it's Department of Ag and Biosecurity. Adding another deputy that's going to be able to focus on biosecurity. It is that big of a problem. It is a threat to all of us. So again, we appreciate the House Majority Caucus. We appreciate the legislature's support. We appreciate, again, Act 231. And Farm Bureau has a bill this year that's actually asking for that $20 million back. We want to continue that line of funding. You heard my number, $88 million. $20 million isn't going to do the job, but it's a lot better than what we've been doing. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Miyamoto. Next, Christy Martin, Coordinating Group on Alien pest species.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Christy Martin, Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species, CGAPS. It is always so tough to follow, Brian. We would like to provide just some comments on this. It is a very heavy lift, and so a couple of things. Renaming the board, the Department of Ag to include biosecurity really does widen that focus, or it actually shines a light on that wide focus that it already had. So we respectfully request that the Board of Agriculture actually reflect the wide variety of biosecurity threats, so not just agricultural threats. We recommend adding some members that have some expertise, perhaps in marine biosecurity, perhaps in public health or vector biosecurity, and not just agriculture. We also suggest, we want to thank, first of all, House Draft 1 did a couple of things. One of them is really appreciated, and that is when there's a biosecurity emergency, the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, which is a high-level council, shouldn't report to the Deputy of Biosecurity, but it should work with, and we definitely appreciate that change, just like kudos. But our third point, we wanted to point out that that change, that House Draft 1, actually included a change, and I want to highlight that the language should, I'm hoping that the language reverts to what was in the original bill regarding the authority to quarantine. Department of Agriculture does now, with the Chapter 4-72, has the authority to quarantine something that is for sale to the public. But it can't quarantine something that is not for sale to them. They need both authorities. So I'm super happy for that Chapter 4-72 that allows them the authority to quarantine something that is infested and the area when it's for sale to the public. But they need that other one as well. So an area that's infested where the commodities are not for sale to the public, they need the ability to jump on red imported fire ants wherever that shows up, and that little piece would do that for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next, Cindy Freitas on Zoom. Aloha, please proceed.
Okay. He mele komo a he mele aloha no nā kupuna I ka au I hala. Aloha mai kako.
Aloha.
I am Cindy Freitas. I'm a Native Hawaiian descendant prior to the inhabitants of 1778, born and raised in Hawaii, and I'm also a culture practitioner. I'm in support for SB 427. Oh, it's HB. Oh.
Yep.
It holds the corporation, individual, and federal agency accountable for how they use public lands, ensuring that their actions align with the values and interests of the state and its citizens. Since federal agencies are also subject to this requirement, this provision ensures that even entities from the federal government must meet state expectations before securing leases. This establishes a more balanced and accountability relationship between state and federal entities in land use. In essence, this provision protects public lands by ensuring they are leased to responsible parties who follow financial, environmental, and legal rules. It holds both private and public entities accountable, promoting sustainability, ethical practice, and proper management of valuable natural resource. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is the last testifier on House Bill 427 relating to biosecurity. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 427? If not, questions, members. Chair Kahaloa.
Thank you, Chair Tarnas, for Hawaii Department of Agriculture. Jonathan, just wanted to clarify the CGAP's testimony on the amendment related to your quarantine authority. I don't know if you've read that testimony, but do you agree with that assessment? And should we make that amendment?
Yeah, I did not read the testimony, but I believe that Ms. Martin is right. I think from the standpoint of the rules, they do not enable if the commodity is not offered for movement. So yeah, I think that's obviously a potential loophole in the restriction, in the regulation, and obviously including that is going to be something to manage. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Any other questions? Representative Shimizu?
Thank you, Chair. Question for, I'm not sure if it's Department of Agriculture or DLNR, but I totally appreciate the intent of this bill and just the big picture of where it's headed. Forgive me for my simple-minded question, but can these changes be done like just administratively instead of passing a new law? I mean, because it just from a business perspective, it just sounds very expensive and possibly inefficient, especially the startup portion. And forgive me, I'm just coming from a business perspective.
Yeah, so a lot of, at least in this particular measure, a lot of the work is actually already being done. So we already have inspectors, we're already doing inspections. And a lot of the changes here are meant to broaden a lot of the work to manage gaps in the current system as it exists. And I'm trying to think in this particular one, if there's something that's really like a really heavy lift. I think some of the processes like the biosecurity emergency and things like that, those are, I think, things that haven't been done. And there aren't really processes for it, but a lot of it is more clarifying a lot of the things that need to be done, education and outreach programs and things that we already do, and it's just kind of putting them out there to ensure that they're done.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Vice Chair?
I think I got a little bit ahead of myself with the last bill because, Brian, you're right. That question was meant for this bill. So this is a really big lift, and I just want to make sure the department is confident in being able to incorporate and effectuate what's written in the bill.
I think like the probably the biggest lift is the positions, I think, and at least for plant quarantine, because the positions here are actually for the entire division. So they're for the plant quarantine branch, the plant pest control branch, and for the pesticides branch. So for plant quarantine, the inclusion of the 22 positions that were from Act 231 would essentially bring us back to the level that we were in 2009. So like it's just bringing us back to the standard that we were at. We're not necessarily really pushing a lot forward. It will give us, for example, the ability to work night shifts at the airports, expand coverage in Maui, do more certified nursery inspections in Hawaii Island, and increase in capacity in Kauai and Kona, which have the lower staff levels, and then potentially on Molokai. But again, with the exception of the Molokai position, really most of those positions existed in the past, and they've been lost. So the positions, thankfully, are, with the exception of one of them, are already. I don't know what the HR term is, but they're already kind of there. We're just bolstering the numbers so that we can have more coverage and have more capacity to do a lot of the work.
Okay, thanks. I also want to clarify, just to be technically correct, when I said earlier Molokai doesn't have little fire ants, CRB, or coqui frogs, I would say that we haven't detected them yet, and that we have had 7 or 8 coqui frogs, but luckily our invasive species committee was fast enough to control them before they could spread. So just wanted to make that on the record.
Yeah. Presence or absence is based on a lot of a different set of folks that's required to constantly manage that, right? Because if you're not looking, you're not finding. Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other questions? If not, we'll move on. Thank you very much to the testifiers. Next up, House Bill 498 relating to agricultural crimes. This measure establishes the Hawaii Agricultural Crimes Council, expands the duties of the Department of Agriculture to collaborate with and support the council, and establishes the Agricultural Enforcement Special Fund. First up, we have the Department of Law Enforcement. Thank you for your patience.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Jared Ridula. I'm the Deputy Director for Law Enforcement. Our department supports this bill. We are thankful to the committee for hearing this because efforts to make the agriculture crime environment better for our ranchers and farmers is something that we very much support. I do want to offer very respectfully to the committee a suggestion to make the bill better if it should continue. And that is, this particular bill proposes to have agriculture law enforcement officers who are full-fledged law enforcement officers. These officers can be anticipated to have to work in very remote places, late at night, far from backup, and then they have to enforce the law to include felony provisions. You know, often in my own experience as a law enforcement officer, when I've confronted people at night in very far places, I've often thought to myself, if something happens, I hope people are able to find me. I think when you're out in those kinds of places, it can get dangerous very quickly. This particular proposal would say that those proposed agriculture enforcement officers are prohibited from carrying a firearm. And we'd very respectfully request that the committee consider allowing those officers to carry a firearm for their protection and so that they also can enforce the law effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Attorney General.
Good afternoon. Kelsey Nagasa, Deputy Attorney General, providing comments on HB 498 HD1. And in the proposed Section 4, which I believe the Director was speaking about, the bill requires the Council to appoint and commission one or more investigators as required to investigate agricultural crimes. However, the appointment of investigators to conduct these kind of criminal investigations attached to an administrative board which does not have independent law enforcement authority is an unusual provision. We have provided some suggestions in our written testimony, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person who wishes to testify is from the Department of Agriculture. Next, Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You have our written testimony and support. We absolutely support this. We support any effort to, as DLE said, reduce agricultural crimes. This year, there's several bills addressing agricultural crimes. Unfortunately, one of them is named after Cranston Pia, and it seems like it takes a tragic and unnecessary death to really elevate the problem of ag crimes. Data, again, 2019, a survey was done. What is the impact to agriculture as far as ag crimes, meaning theft, trespass, vandalism? $14.4 million. That's way underreported. So we appreciate any effort that the legislature can provide the sector to address agricultural crimes. This is just one mechanism. We do want to mahalo Department of Law Enforcement. They've really embraced supporting our farmers and ranchers with agricultural crimes. Again, it's a tough issue. Our farms and ranches are located in rural areas. We understand law enforcement uses based off of population. But if we don't do something, you know, it's just getting harder and harder to farm. Farmers and ranchers have razor-thin margins. You heard us talk about the impact of invasive species, transportation, labor, energy cost, land and water. These are all piling up on our farmers and ranchers. Let's take away some things that we can maybe address and give some assistance to our farmers and ranchers and have them not invest in mitigating ag crimes and invasive species, yet instead putting that resources into their production and operations to grow. We want to achieve some of these agriculture goals. We have double food production, our farm to school, and our farm to state, the institutional purchasing preserve our ag lands, support our farmers and ranchers. Ag crimes is getting to be a bigger and bigger problem. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Miyamoto. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on HB 498? If not, questions, members? If not, we'll move on to the final bill on our agenda. Oh, Representative Miyamoto.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Department of Law Enforcement. I guess my question is, I understand there's another bill, HB 501, which creates a crime unit, a special crime unit out of the DLE to specifically fight agriculture crime. So the question is, would that be redundant to this bill? Is that something that the intent of what is here could be incorporated in your department?
If I understand your question correctly, sir, there could be some redundance, but there are really good parts of this bill. For example, the Agriculture Enforcement Council getting together and analyzing, for example, trends, and the desire in this particular bill to create databases and information sharing regimes. Those are really important in the fight, in any kind of crime fighting, but particularly in this type of crime fighting. As the Farm Bureau testified, we don't have a lot of data. And we've had many agriculture-specific criminal laws on the books, but not a very good tradition of enforcing those laws. And so a crime council like this could be very beneficial. So perhaps on the investigator, law enforcement officer side, there could be some redundance there. But on the beginning portion of the bill, there certainly is good advantage there.
Okay, I'm just thinking that sometimes, bureaucracy is inefficient, and if we can have it merged into one, more efficiency could be working just side by side instead of two separate entities, but that remains to be seen. Thanks for the testimony. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Shimizu. Okay, moving on to the final bill, HB 1064, relating to fire protection. This measure effectuates the recommendations of the Phase 3 forward-looking report by the Fire Safety Research Institute on the August 2023 Maui wildfires and further clarifies the role of the State Fire Marshal and appropriates funds. First up, we have testimony from DLNR, Mr. Michael Walker.
Aloha again. I'm Michael Walker. I serve as a statewide fire protection forester for DLNR, Forestry and Wildlife, and I also am serve as the department's representative on the State Fire Council. The department has submitted language in support, commenting on the bill in 1064. We do support the intent of the bill expanding the capacity of the Office of the State Fire Marshal and redefining the role of the State Fire Council. And we've also inserted suggestions in there about clarification of who the fire marshal actually reports to. It's in the bill, he's administratively assigned to the Department of Defense, and we would like to recommend that the fire marshal report to the governor. We've had conversations with the Office of a State Fire Marshal in Oregon, and having the ability to report directly to the governor gives them an authority and mandate that best serves the state. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Next, General Logan, Department of Defense. Welcome, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you. Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Poi Poi, and members of the committee. I'm Major General Stephen Logan, the Adjutant General for the State of Hawaii Department of Defense, and also the Director of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. The Department of Defense rests on its testimony in support of House Bill 1064 HD1, and if I could just articulate a few more facts. The purpose of this bill is to amend the laws concerning the Office of the State Fire Marshal to best effectuate the recommendations of the Phase 3 forward-looking report, and also place the office as an attached agency under the Department of Defense. So I'm standing by for any questions that you or the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Next, Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. Mr. Jade Boutai, welcome. Please proceed.
Hello, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Poi Poi, members of the committee. David Rodriguez with the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. We offered testimony and strong support to transfer the State Fire Marshal's Office and the State Fire Council to the Department of Defense, as we are not fire experts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Next, Hawaiian Electric. In support on Zoom. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is James Abraham. I'm testifying on behalf of Hawaiian Electric in support of House Bill 1064. We'll stand on our written testimony. Just to briefly summarize, Hawaiian Electric has published our wildfire safety strategy, which outlines our plan for the next 3 years on the investments we're going to make and the steps we're going to take to protect communities. That said, wildfire safety is a all of society issue, and we do see the state and counties as having important roles in this. And the Phase 3 forward-looking report focuses on what the state and counties should be, the actions they can take to protect our communities. So we support this bill as it aims to implement those recommendations. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Next, Elizabeth Pickett, Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization on Zoom. Please proceed.
Hey, good afternoon. Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Poi Poi, and members of the committee. We submitted comments, and I wanted to provide some background and some highlights. So first, I'm so thankful that this version of the bill really does incorporate many of the best practices that we have learned about. And so that background is really just that, Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization, we're a nonprofit organization. We've been serving as the state's hub of wildfire research, mitigation, planning, community programs, et cetera, for 25 years. And we often conduct background research to support and inform decision-making so we can find the best available information. We've done a deep dive, we've reached out, we have national partners, we've learned from state fire marshals. I want to make note that there are 49 other states that have offices of state fire marshals, so we have so many building blocks to learn from. We've done a deep dive with Oregon and Colorado, in part because they're so similar to Hawaii in their threats and size and governance structures. And so all of that information is available in our testimony, and we would be happy to answer questions if any come up.
Thank you very much. That's all the testifiers we've had sign up for today on this measure. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 1064? If not, questions, members? Chair Bellotti.
General Logan. General Logan, the language that attaches the Office of the State Fire Marshal to your department administratively reads, the Office of the State Fire Marshal is established within the department for administrative purposes. As I read that, I read this to say that the State Fire Marshal under this language could report directly to the governor. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. It's very similar to the Office of Veteran Services that's also attached to the Department of Defense, where we would take care of their administrative, their human resources, their contracting, and their fiscal requirements. But yet he could still report, or she, because nobody's been hired into the position yet, report directly to the governor. And either way, I would try to implement whatever the guidance or the priorities that the governor had issued to the individual himself.
So you wouldn't be opposed to adding, just because there continues to be kind of clashing testimony coming out of the executives, that we could add to that language on page 3, line 7, comma, providing that the State Fire Marshal reports directly to the governor. Would that be amenable to you?
I personally wouldn't have any problem with that, but I would have to check with the Office of the Governor before I commit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I
Yes,
don't-
yes,
not
please
for-
go ahead.
Not for General Logan, but for Ms. Pickett, I believe. So I've been doing a deeper dive into the FSRI Phase 3 report, and I recognize that there's 10 priorities identified. And Priority 1 and 2 is action planning and accountability, facilitation of a process to plan and implement subsequent priorities, as well as priority 2 is really setting up the Office of the State Fire Marshal. Is that a correct characterization of the report?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and then priorities 3 through 10 actually covers a whole lot of subject matter areas. There's one in particular that I'm drilling down on, the wildfire education programming priority, as well as the vegetation and land management priority. Can, you know, as I read the HD1, what priority 3, wildfire education programming, is really, really quite important, and that's reflected in HD1 for the community reductions. Within that section, the community risk reduction program, I know that you and others in the community are really wanting to push the hazard mapping and the wildfire hazard mapping, but does that wildfire hazard mapping fall under partly the community risk reduction efforts?
That's a really good question. Usually it's a standalone feature of an Office of State Fire Marshal, in part because it's not just the mapping, it's actually data management that we're asking for in addition to the mapping. Because we don't have consistent statewide data systems, processing, collection, et cetera, we are actually missing out on a lot of federal resources. So there's a data management aspect that needs to be attended to for the state of Hawaii. And then from that, that will allow us to have additionally the data we need to be able to map out and really see where our trends and patterns of fire occurrence are, where our risks are, et cetera, et cetera. Some of that is for community risk reduction programs, and it would be part of that, but some of that also indicates where we can do land use planning, different zoning, incentives and penalties for different land uses and risk reduction on the landscape. Where we need to shore up our resources, put in more water, put in prioritize evacuation, secondary evacuation routes, et cetera. So that data and those maps actually pertain across all of the priorities.
Okay,
Even the existing hazard maps that we have informed Hawaiian Electric's wildfire safety strategy. It's informed a lot of our existing community and landscape programming. So it's kind of like a catch-all. It informs all of those areas.
And then one further question. You said you've done a deep dive into Oregon and Colorado. Does Colorado have a statewide hazard mapping plan? Or a statewide?
Well, most states do. But I don't know the specifics of their exact mapping, but I can look that up. You know, we can reach out and ask them about that. We know that most states besides ourselves have more consistent data management. And I'm not sure about the mapping, so I have to ask about that.
Okay, so that was Colorado, one of the places that you said you did do a deep dive in. I guess one final question, Chair. You know, I've been looking into the wildfire hazard mapping process in Oregon, which actually, while it is a best practice, they just really kind of completed theirs in 2024, which was, I mean, it's very recent in time. And they're not even fully completed with their project, but it seems like they did 3 parallel things in addition to the wildfire mapping process. They had to focus on things like what was happening in their insurance code. They had to focus on a communication strategy. And there was one more area. And I think that, you know, this bill is trying to do a lot. And I also think it tried to do a lot last year. But in the attempt to do a lot, maybe that we need to phase in this requirement for a wildfire hazard map in addition to these other areas where we know Oregon sort of had a failed kind of rolling out of its process. I think, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty familiar with their rollout of their maps, and it coincided, from what I understand, it coincided with 2 years after some significant events and losses in the insurance industry. Their insurance premiums went up, but it all came out within the same week or two, and there was a lot of misunderstanding and public backlash that the insurance rates were connected to the maps. And so they had to suck it all back in and then do a rollout. And so a lot of the best practice that we have learned about isn't because they got it right, it's because they got it wrong. And they've learned their lessons, they've had to litigate, they've had to mitigate, they've had to do that. And so some of this is like, don't do it our way, here are the watch outs. And so that's the recommendation, but it is common to start focused and then have a plan for a sustained build out to start to address the system-wide issues. That actually is very common. But in order to know how you build it out and what you need to do, you at least need good data. And you need to understand that, you need to track it, you need to understand where to then address in a prioritized way. And so that's why the hope is we at least can get the data portion covered.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? If not, that's all the questions on all of the bills today. We're going to now go into decision-making. Thank you to all the testifiers for sticking with us, and thanks to the members for being here. Let's go to the top of the agenda, House Bill 606, relating to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. I recommend we move this out as is and put in the Standing Committee report the request for an effective date of January 1st, 2026. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 606 as is. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Bellotti.
Aye.
Representative Cochran is excused. Representative Hashem, excused. Representative Kahaloa. Aye. Representative Peruso.
Aye.
Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Todd. Aye. Representative Garcia.
Aye.
Representative Shimizu. Aye. Recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next bill, House Bill 1086. I recommend we move this out as is. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1086 HD1 as is, noting Representatives Cochran and Hashem as excused. Are there any noes or reservations? Hearing none, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 1307, relating to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. I want to acknowledge that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands would still have to do everything required under Chapter 343. Which includes environmental analysis, cultural impact statements, and it's clear that they will need to do official beneficiary consultation, not just something through NREL. So this committee assumes that they will do such consultation and comply with Chapter 343. And so I would recommend that we move forward HB 1307 with an HD2 making technical amendments only. Questions or concerns, members? Shimizu. Yes,
Sure,
Representative Shimizu.
I see the potential and the intent, and I still have some concerns which you did address, so I will be voting with reservations.
Thank you.
Same request.
Certainly. Other questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1307 HD1 with amendments, Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused, and reservations from Rep. Peruso and Rep. Shimizu. Any additional noes or reservations?
No vote.
No vote for Representative Garcia. Okay, hearing no others, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next measure, House Bill 1408, relating to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. I would like to move this forward as is, but include in the Standing Committee report that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands should provide the next committee with a legal opinion on if we should retain the phrase, quote, notwithstanding the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920 as amended, on page 4, line 19 and 20. It's a legal question. We were not able to get the answer from the Attorney General or Department of Hawaiian Homelands, so I would request that the next committee answer that question. That's my recommendation. Any questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1408 HD1 as is, Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations? Hearing none, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 1088. I've requested that Department of Hawaiian Homelands provide the next committee, Finance, with information on what school impact fees that they have already been exempted from and how much, and then how much have they already paid in school impact fees. And then if this were adopted, how much would they save by being exempted? That information would be important to Finance. With that in mind, I recommend we move this forward. It already has a defective date, so I recommend we move this out as is. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1088 HD1 as is. Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Any noes or reservations?
With reservations, please.
Okay, reservations for Representative Shimizu. Okay, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 1496, I would recommend we move this out with amendments. We need to make some technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. I would like to include the request from the Hawaii Department of Education that the report is due in June of 2025. And I would like to include some recommendations that came from a couple of different testifiers, including Punana Leo. This would be on page 5, and line 3, it would read, at least one member shall be a proficient Hawaiian-speaking educator, practitioner, or scholar of Hawaiian studies or the Hawaiian language. And then it would continue as written. And then on line 10, it said the Office of Hawaiian Affairs shall each nominate one proficient Hawaiian-speaking educator, practitioner, or scholar of Hawaiian studies or the Hawaiian language for selection. So I would like to include that. And then also, I want to amend section 4 as suggested by Punana Leo, that the superintendent of education, with the approval of the board, shall appoint complex area superintendents for schools, including a proficient Hawaiian language speaking complex area superintendent for Kapapahana Kaiopuni schools. That, and I have prior concurrence from the education chair for making that change. And technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. It already has a defective date. Those are my recommendations. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1496 HD1 with amendments. Representative Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations? Hearing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next measure, House Bill 616, relating to the safety of educational workers. On this, I have to admit my frustration that we're back again dealing with the same issue, and I was hoping that the DOE and the Attorney General would be able to figure this out and make progress. But it's clear that they've made little progress, certainly not sufficient. And so I do want to move this bill forward to continue to emphasize to the department that this is a very serious matter. They need to take better care and protect their educational workers. They're not doing a good job. And Department of Human Resources Development has emphasized how important this is for all state agencies to protect their workers from harassment. And these days, we're getting more harassment for whatever reason, and it's just we need to protect them. So I would like to recommend we move this bill forward with some additional amendments, technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. I would like to adopt the recommendation from the Attorney General and their testimony, I would also like to adopt so I guess it's technical amendments and then the Attorney General amendments, and I want to emphasize it did get prior concurrence from the Education Chair for making those changes. So those are my recommendations. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 616 HD1 with amendments. Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations? Hearing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next bill, House Bill 329. On this measure, I would like to recommend we move this out with amendments. And I would like to include the recommendations of the School Facilities Authority in their testimony. I have prior concurrence from the Education Chair to make those changes. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 329 HD1 with amendments. Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations? Hearing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next measure, House Bill 739. On this measure, I'd like to move it out with amendments, technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. I'd like to adopt Department of Taxation amendments and the Holomua amendments that are suggested in their testimony. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 739 HD1 with amendments. Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations?
With reservations.
Reservations for Representative Garcia. Recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to 745. On this measure, I acknowledge the concerns from IBEW, Mr. Bukowski. I did check with the housing chair. He emphasized to me that that he was assured by the Attorney General that the counties currently have, under existing law, the full flexibility to amend the state building code as they see fit. And this bill would not change the county's authority to amend the codes, since they already have it. But it is intended to simply speed up the adoption process statewide by ensuring that the state building code version becomes law upon passage, instead of giving the counties 2 years to figure out what they want to do. The housing chair is hopeful this will help ensure that Hawaii has more current codes and ensure more uniformity statewide. I did not get his concurrence to adopt your recommendations, but I did follow up with him. He requested we move this out as is. I admit that we got very late testimony from Department of Accounting and General Services, which was substantive, much too late for us to consider or to have the housing chair be consulted to determine whether or not we could adopt anything. So I would like to include in the Standing Committee report a reference to the very late testimony from the Department of Accounting and General Services and ask that Finance address their concerns. And I will alert the Housing Committee Chair to their late testimony and ask him to read it and provide advice to the Finance Chair. And so just in the Standing Committee report, we'll just reference the late testimony from the Department of Accounting and General Services and ask Finance to address them. Otherwise, I would recommend we move this out as is. Questions or concerns, members? Representative Peruso first.
Just based on the testimony from DAGS, I'm going to be WR on this measure, just so we have more discussions about it.
Yeah, no, I was concerned too, so I appreciate you saying that. Representative Shimizu.
Chair, same.
Sure. Very, very relevant. My hands are a bit tied because we got it in so late. So, any other comments or concerns?
Reservations as well.
Okay, Representative Bellotti, also reservations. Any other comments or concerns? Yes, Representative Takayama.
Reservations for me as well, Chair.
Yes, yes. Okay, sounds good. And you can also just say it when you want to vote. You can state you have reservations. Representative Garcia, also the same. Okay, so my recommendation is to move this out, and everyone can serve their reservations, and Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay. Voting on House Bill 745 HD1 as is. Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. And I have reservation votes for Representative Bellotti, Peruso, Takayama, Shimizu, and Garcia. Okay, any additional noes or reservations? Okay, hearing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Moving on, House Bill 1433 relating to eviction mediation. On this measure, I would like to recommend we move this out with an amendment where there are, on page 8, line 4, where there's a blank number of days, page 10, line 6, a blank number of days, and on page 6, lines 1 and end line 6, where it says 20 days, I want all of those to be 30 days. So we can be consistent across the board, as recommended by a testifier. I would like to note in the Standing Committee report, to emphasize that the reason why this program has been successful in the past was because there was sufficient funding for rent subsidies, and as was noted in testimony. Those are my, that's my recommendation. Any questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1433 HD1 with amendments, Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations?
Reservations.
Reservations for Representative Garcia. Recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. House Bill 175, I recommend we move this out as is. Questions or concerns? Otherwise, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 175 HD1 as is, Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations? Okay, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next, House Bill 1449. On this one, I would recommend some amendments, technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. And also on page 5, line 12, I would like to confine the ability of Department of Agriculture to adopt, amend, and repeal rules for the general provisions, or for the specific provisions within this bill. And I will leave it to our bill drafters to do that. Right now, it says that they can adopt, amend, and repeal rules for any other purpose within this part, and I think that could be outside the bill's title of relating to plant care components. So I want to tighten that up just to say the Department of Agriculture can adopt, amend, and repeal rules that are specific to the subject matter of this bill. In addition, I would like to include the Department of Agriculture's amendments that they have presented in their testimony, and include in the Standing Committee report the positions that they had requested in their testimony. I'm not going to put that in the bill. I'm going to put it in the Standing Committee report with the number of positions and the estimated annual salary costs. Is that right, Chair? Okay, I got the prior concurrence from the Chair of Agriculture and Food Systems. Any questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1449 HD1 with amendments, Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations? Recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to House Bill 427. I'd like to recommend we move this out with some technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. I would like to take one of the amendments from the testimony from the coordinating group on alien pest species, which is found on page 2 under the title headline Hawaii Invasive Species Council, that we would strike, quote, notwithstanding Chapter 194 to the contrary, end quote, on page 30, line 7, so that we don't create a conflict. So that is my only recommendation, and moving it out with an HD2. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 427 HD1 with amendments, Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Any noes or reservations?
Reservations.
Reservations for Representative Garcia. Recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. On House Bill 498 HD1 relating to agricultural crimes, I would like to, on page 6, move it out with some recommended changes. On page 6, line 19, right now the chapter it makes a reference to Chapter 84, which is the Ethics Code. I think it really actually should be Chapter 89, which is collective bargaining. That makes more sense. I think that was just a drafting error. I would like to adopt the recommendations of the Attorney General and the Department of Law Enforcement. I got prior concurrence from the Agriculture and Food Systems Committee Chair. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 498 HD1 with amendments. Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Any noes or reservations? Recommendation is adopted.
Moving on to the last measure, ask the chair of the PBS committee to sit next to me while we work our way through these amendments here. On this measure, I would like to move it out with some amendments. On page 3, line 1 to 3, the term fire protection equipment is not used in the new part, so I think we need just to delete that. The paragraph on page 16, line 5 to 6, it states that the fire marshal may adopt rules concerning the reports by the counties as described in subsection B, but there's no mention of any reports in subsection B. So how about let's change from reports to requirements, because subsection B does describe certain requirements. So I'm just changing from reports to requirements. We would like to, yeah, this one. So on page 3, so this would be on page, yeah. So on page 3, this is on the 132-B, Office of the State Fire Marshal, that it says, the Office of the State Fire Marshal is established within the Department for administrative purposes, providing that the State Fire Marshal reports directly to the governor. On page 38, on line 9, delete the words owned airports. I just want state facilities. Basically what I'm trying to do is to clarify that the Office of the Fire Marshal is responsible for inspection of all state facilities, including schools. On line 14 on page 38, delete the section 1 at least once each year at all public schools. And then on page 39, line 2, delete the words owned airports, just so it reads that the Office of the State Fire Marshal shall conduct fire and safety inspections at all state facilities at least once a year. On that first one, it was, we had some misunderstanding. Earlier we had talked about it, and I thought we had come to agreement. So I want to stick with our earlier agreement regarding attaching the Office of the State Fire Marshal. I would like to temporarily attach the Office of the State Fire Marshal to the Office of the Governor, okay? I know there's lots of discussion within the Governor's office about this, but and where it should actually go. So our agreement earlier, which I'd like to stick with, is that we're temporarily attaching the Office of the State Fire Marshal to the Office of the Governor to allow for more time for discussion on where it should be permanently located. And so they can help stand up the Office of the State Fire Marshal in close collaboration with state agencies. The State Fire Marshal shall be appointed by the Governor from a list of 3 names chosen by the State Fire Council. This allows input from all the county fire chiefs, state fire agencies, DOFA and DOT airports on the selection of the State Fire Marshal, but with direct appointment by the Governor. So we need to amend section 132H on page 9 and page 46, line 15. And the State Fire Council shall remain in the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations to allow for more time for discussion on where it should be permanently located. The State Fire Marshal will be a member of the State Fire Council. Chair Bellotti, on the last, the fire hazard maps?
You can do what you want.
Okay, so, and I would like to require the Office of State Fire Marshal to create state wildfire hazard maps and collect fire data from the counties. We heard from testimony that it's important to gather this data and get these maps out there so we're all operating from the same information. So I want to add a new section, 132-00, statewide wildfire hazard map. I provided this information to members. The Division of the State Fire Marshal shall oversee the development and maintenance of a comprehensive statewide wildfire hazard map that displays the wildfire hazard zones described in subsection E of this section. B, the purposes of the statewide wildfire hazard map are to, 1, educate Hawaii residents and property owners about the residents and property owners' wildfire exposure by providing transparent and science-based information. 2, assist in prioritizing fire adaptation and mitigation resources for the most vulnerable locations. And 3, identify where defensible space standards and structure hardening codes will apply. C, there are 3 statewide wildfire hazard zones, low, moderate, and high, which must be based on weather, climate, topography, and vegetation. Subparagraph 1, the State Fire Marshal shall determine the hazard values for the low, moderate, and high wildfire hazard zones and shall assign a numerical value describing the likelihood and intensity of a wildfire based on specific factors or conditions of weather, climate, topography, and vegetation as modeled for a given pixel. The State Fire Marshal's determination shall be determined using a statistically objective methodology. The State Fire Marshal's determination shall be publicly posted on the Division of the State Fire Marshal's website and provided on the state wildfire map at the time of its publication. The State Fire Marshal's determination shall be reevaluated on an annual basis. D, the department shall ensure that the statewide wildfire hazard map is publicly available in electronic form on its website and shall be available upon request in electronic form at no cost. E, the statewide wildfire hazard map must, 1, be based on the wildfire hazard zones, 2, be sufficiently detailed to allow the assessment of wildfire hazard at the property ownership level, 3, include a layer that geospatially displays the locations of socially and economically vulnerable communities. 4, be completed and released expeditiously following the collaboration described in subsection G of this section. And 5, be offered in the languages spoken throughout the state as practicable. F, the statewide wildfire hazard map shall be developed, 1, using current peer-reviewed data sets when calculating wildfire hazard, 2, calculating wildfire hazard as a combined hazard rating value incorporating annual burn probability and wildfire intensity, and 3, utilize the most representative fuel characteristic practical, and 4, to include a layer that geospatially displays the locations of socially and economically vulnerable communities. G, there shall be community engagement in the process of developing the statewide wildfire hazard map that, 1, may include the State Fire Council, other state agencies, local governments, other public bodies, and any other information sources which the State Fire Marshal deems appropriate. 2, ensures through the use of clear language, graphics, visuals, and examples that the underlying criteria for assigning hazard zones are publicly available and comprehensible to a public audience. 3, is interactive and does not consist solely of delivering information in a top-down manner. And 4, is coordinated with local partners, including counties, relevant state agencies, and the State Fire Council. H, when the draft map is developed, it shall be released, but before final publication of the map occurs, the Division of the State Fire Marshal shall accept public comment on the map for a period not exceeding 60 days. I, in maintaining the statewide wildfire hazard map, the department shall make technical adjustments as needed and update the map consistent with the results of appeals as described in subsection L of this section. State agencies and the county shall, as appropriate, use the map layer described in subsection D3 of this section to direct resources for wildfire hazard reduction and wildfire resiliency to those most in need and assist with identifying communities for extensive targeted engagement and outreach related to wildfire hazard reduction and wildfire resiliency. K, using the statewide wildfire hazard map developed pursuant to this section, the county shall conduct outreach, 1, in partnership with community leaders and community-based organizations, 2, by using different media, 3, by disseminating information through local schools, stores, faith-based organizations, and medical offices, And 4, by offering all information in the languages spoken in the relevant community as practicable. L, the Division of the State Fire Marshal shall provide notice and information to a property owner whose property is assigned to the high hazard zone within the statewide wildfire hazard map about the fact that the property has been assigned to the high hazard zone, the effects of the assignment, and how the property owner may appeal the assignment of the property owner's property to the high hazard zone. The notice and information provided to a property owner shall be on a standard form as prepared by the Division of the State Fire Marshal. M, the Division of the State Fire Marshal shall adopt rules pursuant to Chapter 91 that, 1, allow affected property owners and local governments to appeal the assignment of properties to the wildfire hazard zones after the map is developed, after any updates to the map, and within a reasonable time after delivery of the notice and information described in subsection K. And 2, provide that assignments of properties to the high hazard zone may be appealed as a contested case as described in Chapter 91. I'm almost done, members. Add new section, Section 132-1, Hawaii Revised Statutes, as amended to read as follows. The county fire chiefs, the powers and duties that the fire chief of each county shall, this is already existing language, the fire chief of each county shall keep in the county's fire chief's office a record of all fires occurring in the county and of all facts concerning the same, and shall make such compilations and statistical investigations as the fire chief may deem proper. I'm going to delete the words "as the fire chief may deem proper" and just say "on an annual basis." That way we get that information annually. On subsection 2, right now it says supervise and make or cause to be made periodically a thorough inspection record of all property. I want to change that from periodically to on a biennial basis. And then add one more section, subsection C, which reads as follows. On January 1st of each year, the fire chief of each county shall transmit the records and statistical investigations compiled pursuant to subsection A to the Division of the State Fire Marshal. On January 1st of each alternating year, the fire chief of each county shall transmit the inspection record of property which may constitute a fire hazard within their county, compiled pursuant to subsection B2 to the Division of the State Fire Marshal. I apologize, members, that that's a long thing I had to read. But that, basically, what we got these amendments from was work within the different government executive branch agencies, working with the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization, and legislators to come up with this language. And I apologize that I've had to read all of that, but that's the only way I can get it into the record. So, that's my recommendation. We need to make technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. And this is a work in progress. You know, myself, Chair Bellotti, we're not letting go of this bill. We're going to continue to work on it. We're going to be looking for comments from the executive agencies to be able to tell us what is in our recommendations. If you think that they're going to work or not going to work, we want to know that so we can make these amendments. This will be moving on to finance. So Chair Bellotti and I would be able to make changes going forward. And I want to acknowledge and thank Chair Bellotti for allowing me to put this language in here so that the agencies can actually consider this and be able to get back to us to tell us if there are changes that need to be made. So I recognize that Chair Bellotti may not be comfortable with everything that's in here, but I really am trying to get it all on the table so we can talk about it. So with that, questions or concerns, members? Chair Bellotti.
I'll just say I really appreciate you working on this, Chair Tarnas. I would hope that next time the Attorney General who drafted this be willing to provide this in written testimony to the committee, because I think it's really important in advance and not this kind of shoddy work. But with that said, it is a work in progress. This is something that's really important. I think we need to get this right for the people of Hawaii. We also have to make sure that we have a workable statute, a statute that is implementable. And I think because there's been so many moving parts, there's actually inconsistencies even in the bill that we're going to move forward at this point that we're going to have to clean up further. So thank you, Chair, for letting it move forward.
Yeah, I acknowledge that. And this is not the best of legislating, but it does get everything on the table, and we will continue to work on this going forward. And I appreciate your forbearance, Chair Bellotti. Other questions or concerns, members? Representative Shimizu.
My head is spinning, but I trust you, Chair. So I will support it.
You're very kind, thank you. Other questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1064 HD1 with amendments, Representatives Cochran and Hashem are excused. Are there any noes or reservations? Hearing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. There being no further business before this committee today, we are adjourned.